crashing through the lies and disinformation. It's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
We are live on this Friday, January 6th edition of the Alex Jones Show. Roger Stone will be joining us in the second hour, and Alex Jones himself will be calling in the third hour. But for the moment, Donald J. Trump, the president-elect, just came out with this tweet. 10 minutes ago, he said, I'm asking the chairs of the House and Senate committees to investigate top-secret intelligence shared with NBC prior to me seeing it. That's right. They've released the blockbuster evidence that Russia hacked the US presidential election. Or have they? No, they haven't released any evidence yet at all to suggest, to prove that that even happened. What they have released is a report based on another report, based on a claim by the intelligence community that Russian officials celebrated Trump's election. Well, what a surprise. Russian officials were celebrating the fact that humanity wouldn't go into World War III, that they would actually have somewhat positive relations with another world superpower. My God, the horror. This is out of BBC News. Trump election, US identifies agents behind Russian hack. The identities of Russian agents behind the hack are known to US authorities but have not been released, reports say, citing intelligence sources. So again, it's a giant echo chamber. It's the fake mainstream media proven wrong again and again. Remember, only last week, the Washington Post released a report claiming that Russia had hacked the US electric grid. Within hours, had to withdraw that report. The next day, they said it never happened. There was no evidence of it, but they just put the report out anyway. So again, this is a report based on a claim by the intelligence community that Russian officials were celebrating the election, which again, if that's true, fair enough. It wouldn't be a surprise. Is Russian officials celebrating the election proof that Russia hacked the US presidential election? Well, no, it's not. It's not proof of anything. And isn't it rich how the Obama administration, which has waged war on leakers and whistleblowers for its entire 8-year term, has castigated, denounced, demonized Julian Assange for leaking information. Now they leak information, intelligence information, to the media, and it's perfectly fine. Isn't that just deliciously ironic? So we have a new round of anti-Russian hysteria, neo-McCarthyism, red baiting. They're now literally saying that Trump just has to believe this evidence. Again, we haven't seen any. None has been presented publicly. Trump is set to meet with intelligence officials today where they present this evidence, which even CNN admits that there isn't a smoking gun on Russia's intention to benefit Trump's candidacy or claim credit for doing so. So even CNN admits that. But even still, with no evidence whatsoever that Russia directly interfered in the US presidential election, the commentators, the peanut gallery, they're out in force once again saying if Trump doesn't believe the intelligence community, he's not a patriot. They're literally saying that Trump is anti-American if he doesn't believe this evidence, of which none whatsoever has been presented. Absolutely insane situation. You had Lindsey Graham at this hearing yesterday saying that Trump should throw rocks at Russia, basically calling for a direct confrontation with a massively nuclear-armed power. Absolutely insane rhetoric. He sounds like Kim Jong-il from 10 years ago. Completely insane. Throw rocks at a nuclear superpower based on what? At what point does Lindsey Graham, because of this very rhetoric, become a national security threat himself? So, again, more complete flailing and flopping by the fake mainstream news media. They have presented zero evidence. They've leaked this report to the mainstream media again. It contains zero evidence that Russia hacked the election. We'll be back with more on the Alex Jones Show Live. Don't go away. Donald Trump has done a new interview with the New York Times in which he says that the whole Russian hysteria is a political witch hunt to delegitimize his presidency. We're going to get back into that later because we got a busy show. Roger Stone, there you see the New York Times article. Roger Stone, Alex Jones are both coming up. We will both hit on that subject heavily. So for the moment, while we've got time, I'm going to shift back into what we were talking about yesterday. And this is still rumbling on because CNN and the rest of the fake news media are more outraged about my tweets, more outraged about other people's tweets than the sadistic kidnap and torture of a mentally disabled boy. Let that one sink in. They came out against us big time yesterday, mainly CNN. And we've got a clip here, which is a 20-second clip, where they attack me over a tweet. Here's the clip.
Paul Joseph Watson from the conspiracy website InfoWars was quick to tie the case to the Black Lives Matter movement, tweeting, "This is the Black Lives Matter terror the MSM has legitimized." The connection debunked by police, saying there is no evidence to show this terrible attack is linked to the Black Lives Matter movement.
The connection debunked by police. Oh, you mean the same police that said it had no racial motivation while they were screaming F white people? Those police. All right, really credible, yeah. So we're going to get back into that, how BLM rhetoric had a direct connection to what we saw yesterday. Because remember, this is the same media, this is the same news outlet, CNN, that for over a year claimed, with no evidence whatsoever, that Donald Trump's rhetoric was responsible for violence at Donald Trump rallies targeting Donald Trump supporters. So he was to blame for the violence against his own supporters because of his rhetoric. Yet when I say Black Lives Matter rhetoric, their racist, anti-white, hateful, violent rhetoric, is leading to attacks like we saw in Chicago, the kidnapping and torture of this 18-year-old kid, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, even though there are innumerable examples of Black Lives Matter rhetoric-inspired violence. Meanwhile, on the flip side, the so-called violence inspired by Trump's rhetoric, we've been through every case, we've talked about it over and over, virtually every major case of so-called Trump hate crimes committed against anti-Trump people have turned out to be complete frauds, complete hoaxes staged by those very people. So yes, CNN, there is a direct correlation between the same violent, hateful Black Lives Matter rhetoric that you have pushed, that you have legitimized for over 2 years now, and these anti-white racist attacks. And we're going to get into that. But first, this was very funny troll. And I can't take complete credit for it because other people have done it before. But they embedded my tweet in their big article about, oh, you can't say that this is Black Lives Matter inspired. That's racist. They basically put out an article saying that. Embedded my tweet in it with the hashtag BLM kidnapping. They got very triggered over that hashtag because it was trending for 2 solid days on Twitter. So CNN embedded my tweet, and you can see it there. If you click on the image in that tweet, there you see it. Well, when they embedded that tweet, I changed my Twitter name temporarily to CNN is fake news. And it didn't stay up there for long. I mean, I'll give credit to CNN. They deleted the tweet from their article within about 20 minutes of me posting this on Twitter. But what was funny about it, if you scroll down a little bit in that tweet and you see the second image there. So they deleted my tweet. You scroll up a little bit and you see the image there. There it is right there. They deleted my tweet and then included somebody else's tweet, but then this other individual changed his name to CNN is fake news. So everybody clicking on that story yesterday afternoon could see that basically what we thought about CNN, and people were getting a reality check when they read the CNN article. But as I said, within 20 minutes, it was deleted. But that's just a little trick for you out there if you're using Twitter. If your tweets get embedded in mainstream media news articles attacking you, change the display name to basically a red pill kind of thing, and you will get a lot of people going to your Twitter account and seeing what else you've got to say. You can change it back very easily, so I thought that was funny. Again, can't take complete credit for it because people have done it before, but it was a good jape at the time. So basically, we have this entire narrative that there's no connection whatsoever between the fact that the mainstream media has pushed this hateful, racist, divisive rhetoric for over 2 years and the increasing incidence of anti-white hate crime attacks. Oh, but the police said there's no connection. Yeah, the police came out and said, oh, these kids were just stupid. They were just messing around. There was no racial motivation, even as they said, F white people. Even the police had to come out after and say, okay, yes, there was a racial motivation, okay? Even the police came out and corrected themselves. So is their word really that credible on denoting the motivation behind this attack? Well, no, they've proven it isn't, okay? Strike one. So basically CNN is saying there's no connection. The same news outlet, the same fake news media that said for a year that Donald Trump's rhetoric was leading to violence, was causing violence with no evidence whatsoever to back up that claim. Of course, later we found out through James O'Keefe and Project Veritas that it was the DNC, that it was the left, the establishment left, that was creating that violence, funding it, bankrolling it, hiring mentally unstable people to go to Donald Trump rallies and cause violence, at the same time as the mainstream media blamed it on Donald Trump's rhetoric. And yet they have the temerity to say that I can't make a connection between violent, hateful BLM rhetoric and what we saw yesterday. Look at this video that we're playing now. Oh, you remember this one, yeah? Well, what did they say during the torture and the abuse of this poor 18-year-old mentally disabled man? They said, F Donald Trump. Oh, and what's this video we're playing right now? It's a popular rap song that came out about a year ago with the lyrics, F Donald Trump. That song was legitimized. It was given positive reviews by the mainstream music media. So again, we see this cultural narrative, F Donald Trump, violent, hateful, racist threats. In this song, we can't play the audio because it's just complete cussing throughout. They talk about caving Donald Trump's head in with a spade. And this was celebrated by the same mainstream media that is now saying, oh, BLM's completely peaceful. Of course their rhetoric didn't lead to this attack. Absolute nonsense. Literally, they celebrate songs called F White People, have F Donald Trump in the lyrics. And they say that's nothing to do with black kids aping this gangster behavior and saying F Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Yeah, Donald Trump. There you go, right there. We've managed to play some of it without bleeping the whole thing out. So there were two songs. I think we played the second one there as well. There was a song by, let me find the name here. I think it was YG and Nipsey. Again, this song was literally called, the title of the song was F Donald Trump. This was played at music festivals throughout America for months and months. It was celebrated. MTV and Billboard celebrated this song. They said that it was refreshing. In the song, they talk about F Donald Trump. It's racist, it's violent. They talk about why hasn't the Nation of Islam killed Donald Trump yet? This is the violent, hateful rhetoric that was celebrated by the mainstream media. It was upheld, it was legitimized. After, of course, we had a whole 2 years before that of them legitimizing the whole Ferguson movement based on a lie, a complete hoax, hands up, don't shoot, based on a lie that the thug, Michael Brown, was completely innocent when he wasn't. That is the narrative that they upheld for the 2 years prior to that. Remember Time magazine coming out with the article entitled In Defense of Rioting, again, legitimizing violence and hatred, many of it race-based. This is the narrative that the mainstream media has upheld for the past 2 years. So yes, there is a direct correlation between creating that environment of hateful, anti-white, violent rhetoric, and then kids that listen to that kind of music, that listen to that kind of narrative, acting upon it. Like Don Lemon said, oh, these kids don't watch the news. This can't be political, while they're literally saying F Donald Trump. They don't even have to watch the news, Don Lemon. It's in the frigging culture that you upheld, that you legitimized, that MTV legitimized, that Billboard legitimized. And I mean, I was writing about this for the past 2 years, so when they try and take me on at this, they're going to lose, because I know this stuff, because I've written about it for 2 years. Let's continue. So again, there's this narrative. BLM rhetoric had nothing to do with the attack, the torture of this 18-year-old kid, because Black Lives Matter didn't kidnap the kid. This is the level of stupidity we're dealing with. Yeah, I'm not saying D-Ray did it, okay? Black Lives Matter is not an organization. It's not a group. It doesn't have a headquarters, okay? So they don't carry membership cards. So no, you can't directly say the group Black Lives Matter. They're not like ISIS. They don't claim responsibility because they're not an actual organization. They're not a military structure, okay? It's an ideology. And people act on ideologies, especially violent, hateful ones. Again, there you see former Chicago police chief blames Black Lives Matter for rise in violent crime. Police won't go to crime-ridden areas anymore. In many cases, it's called the Ferguson effect because they're not welcome there anymore. Because of this rampant police hatred that the media, that the culture has been pushing. We'll be back to expose it more on the Alex Jones Show Live. Breaking news at Infowars.com. We'll be back. To give you an example of how we're competing and defeating the mainstream media, and this pretty much applies across the board. I've got around, 417,000 Twitter followers. CNN has 30 million. You go on CNN on Twitter, I get probably double, in some cases 3-4 times the amount of retweets. Just from my own little account compared to CNN, which has 30 million followers. That is why they're petrified of us. They don't resonate with anybody anymore because nobody trusts them because they've been caught lying again and again. That's why they can't sell this Russian hysteria narrative. The polls have shown that nobody believes it because they've lost all their credibility. That's what happens with the Washington Post, for example, when you put out fake stories about Russia hacking the US electric grid. Again, which if true could cause a military confrontation. They just put the story out with no evidence whatsoever. They didn't even call the electric company. Then the next day they put out a story, oh yeah, there's actually no evidence for this big blockbuster story that could have caused World War III. Oh, thanks, Washington Post. This is who we're dealing with. That's why they've lost their trust. The polls show people don't believe this Russian hysteria, yet they're still intent on pushing it. That's why they hate us. That's why we're defeating them. And it's all with your support by getting the products at InfoWarsLife.com. That was an intentional segue into a plug, by the way. It wasn't just a... But we've got the 2017 Making Our Bodies Great initiative again with Brain Force at 30% off. This is the supplement that I have taken before doing this show every single day. Doing a 3-hour show, intensive news, commentary, guests, playing clips and everything. It's difficult, it's taxing, but once you take a couple of these bad boys beforehand, it makes it all the more easier. It's a nootropic. Research nootropics, it's what all the Silicon Valley whiz kids are taking. Really helps cognitive functioning no matter what task you're doing. It also helps in social situations. Sometimes you just wake up with brain fog, especially when you're doing, intensive mental tasks. And this really helps. I went to Austin a couple of years ago, jet lagged, no sleep, had to host the entire show, popped some of these beforehand. And again, it's not just caffeine. It's not just like a junk buzz that you get. It actually helps clear things up in your mind. It is Brain Force Plus, 30% off at InfoWarsLife.com. It's part of the 2017 Make Our Bodies Great Again initiative, which also includes massive discounts on all the other great products with 5-star independent reviews, including Super Male Vitality, Liver Shield, Survival Shield, Knockout, Prostagard, and many others. Take back your health at InfoWarsLife.com. Help us continue to defeat CNN, which makes its money off of Gulf state dictatorships like Bahrain and puts out puff pieces saying how great it is to go and visit there while they're literally killing their own people on the street. That's how CNN makes its money. We make our money by selling products like Brain Force that actually work, people enjoy, and that's why people re-up, which you can do to get them delivered without having to order again and again. 30% off Brain Force Plus at InfoWarsLife.com. Finishing up on this CNN BLM issue, and I'll probably get into it a bit later in the show. Basically, the same fake news media that told us a cartoon frog, Pepe the Frog, was racist, are saying that this attack isn't. CNN's Don Lemon said that it was not evil. CNN's Simone Sanders, a commentator there, said it was not a hate crime, even though now the police have said, yes, they've charged them with hate crimes. They're also saying that even to dare to suggest that this had any connection whatsoever to violent, hateful Black Lives Matter rhetoric, which has dominated the culture and the news media for the past 2 years, merely saying that is racist. So no, the attack isn't racist, yelling F white people, forcing him to say he loves black people. No, there's no racial aspect to that whatsoever. You even asking the question if the sacred Black Lives Matter movement, which has chanted for dead cops, which inspired the New York cop killer in 2014, which he said was a Black Lives Matter revenge attack, shot 2 cops in the head. No, you can't dare make that connection, otherwise you're the racist. Absolutely incredible. We played the rap songs again, celebrated, legitimized by the mainstream media. Numerous examples, a cop shot dead in Kentucky. We researched it, turned out the shooter was a BLM supporter, attended Mike Brown's funeral. The 2 Michael Brown supporters who plotted to bomb the Ferguson police station, again, supporters of Black Lives Matter. There's a clear link between their violent rhetoric, violent attacks, and violent anti-white racism. That is a fact. We'll be back with a special Alex Jones report straight up. Stay tuned.
The disinformation campaign against Trump and the American people has gone to the next level. Yesterday, I saw just scores of articles coming out basically threatening the president-elect that if he doesn't bow down to the intelligence community, this shadowy group of basically globalist corporate infiltrators, that they'll bring him down like, quote, Richard Nixon. In fact, even in his son-in-law's own New York Observer newspaper, they've got a big spy chief in there threatening Trump and saying, we'll bring you down if you don't do what we say right now, and if you keep criticizing us, saying we lied about WMDs in Iraq and that we can't be trusted, we'll take you down. Don't think you're invincible. This is so outrageous. This is our president who's elected. And rogue elements of the intelligence community have been running around for the last year claiming that the Russians are stealing our election. When, again, the communist Chinese, the Saudi Arabians, the mainstream media, all these multinational combines, the Clinton Foundation openly gave billions of dollars of money and airtime to her. It was completely lopsided if you weigh it out. Let's just say the Russians hacked, which they didn't. It's tiny compared to all the outside meddling and manipulation of the globalists. But then I saw the headline from CNN. That's right. Intel report says U.S. identifiers had identified go-betweens who gave emails to WikiLeaks. So you read the article from CNN Inside Edition, it's a transcript, and they go, well, now this is not a smoking gun. They actually say, this is not a smoking gun. But we have Russians celebrating whenever he won. Yeah, they announced it at 2 o'clock in the morning here, and over in Russia, that was the afternoon, and they celebrated. Some of the people in the Duma were like, yay, Trump, because Trump said he didn't want to have a new Cold War. Folks in Britain celebrated. People all over the world celebrated. I celebrated when the UK began to pull out of the EU. I celebrated when Italy began to pull out of the EU. Does that mean that Italy's under my control because I'm supporting their nationalist awakening? This is crazy. So we keep hearing hacked, hacked, hacked. When they say hacked, they mean got involved in our election. The truth is Homeland Security broke into at least 6 computers in states where they basically failed to steal the election. We know that now. 5 states were clearly stolen, according to top experts like Bev Harris, from Mr. Trump. We know the fix was in. I mean, we had Newsweek and other publications already printed up Madam President magazines. So here's what's happening. A multinational combine of corporations have taken over the United States and much of Europe and much of the rest of the planet. They believe they have complete control. They were so arrogant they started establishing with the WTO and the IMF, as well as the World Bank and the Exim Bank and a few other major combines, a global corporate body above the law, tax exempt, and then giving themselves all jobs inside of it, setting themselves up like emperors. Kind of like you pull up from being on a month-long vacation and your teenage kids, let's say one's in college, one's 19, one's a senior, one's 17. You pull up, you get home, you've been gone a month, and they've changed the locks, and they're telling you this is our house now. Well, you're going to go set them straight. But even if they try to block you, and I've read about cases like this where people get delusional, you just call the sheriff's department on them. Okay, so Donald Trump's the sheriff's department, folks. We elected him, and he's kicking these snot-nosed punks out of our house, okay? Now, here's the good news. Most of the people in the intelligence community are actually patriots. They've been given a lot of bad jobs over the years. A lot of bad things have been done. But it was the analyst at the Defense Department that exposed the lies about WMDs. It's been the analyst at the Defense Department who exposed the lies about what's been happening in Syria and said no to that. I mean, so many times, whether it was the Pentagon Papers and Daniel Ellsberg or you name it, these leaks are coming from whistleblowers inside the government. Look at Snowden. So I would say I've never seen, studying modern history since the CIA was set up in 1947, a larger percentage of people in the intelligence community that are against globalism and for Donald Trump. In fact, that's why Trump was able to win the election against a tsunami of disinformation, lies, propaganda, foreign cash, you name it, was because the intelligence community realized there was a total globalist takeover of America, and they had to step in. So when we hear that it's Russians that stole the election and not the American people that voted for it, it's an insult to everybody. But it's bigger than that. If anybody counter-hacked our election, it was U.S. intelligence agencies, mainly in defense intelligence and other groups, the NSA, you name it, that leaked the truth. And it was contractors as well. In fact, if you look at the power of contracting groups now, they have a lot more power than even the major agencies because they're able to share some of the data. But look, this is all coming out. The hoax, the fake news is that it's a unified intelligence community against Trump. And Trump knows that. And this attempt by the media now to set it up like it's the American people with Trump and the Russians against the intelligence community shows just how delusional the people pushing these lies are. I mean, the Democratic Party has collapsed. It's not like this rogue intelligence agency group that's backing the fall of Trump has some good, viable backup plan to what they're doing. No, it's the same old arrogant globalism to run us into the ground. But with just, 12 days left until Trump is inaugurated. And we're in this final countdown right now. You better believe that when we saw George Soros the week after the election, 6 weeks ago, quadruple down and double the amount of funding that he was giving to Black Lives Matter and other civil unrest, communist, cop killer type groups. And that's why you've seen the cops getting killed escalate. It's why you've seen the torture of whites escalate. It's why you've seen the race baiting rhetoric just go from out of control to completely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, because this is just such an incredibly dangerous time, and the globalists want to continue to ratchet up the fear and the hysteria. This is just total cloud cuckoo land is the word I'm looking for. And when I say cloud cuckoo land, the elites have a plan, but it's failing, and it's insane, and it's crazy, and it's dangerous, and it's backing bad things. The world, not just America, is rejecting globalism. The world is rejecting centralization. And to say that the Russians hacked us is such a lie. The Russians celebrated because they're on the verge of collapse economically. They're encircled. NATO and the globalists are trying to take down Russia itself with color revolutions, and they're only trying to stabilize themselves and become basically family-oriented again. And look, you could say today that Russia is more Western and more of a guardian of Western values than the West itself, even though it's not the West, predominantly. Because we've gone so far down the rat hole of globalism. And so this whole attack on Russia and other nation states is about these multinational combines and social engineers having full control over the people inside these countries. And so that's why Russia has stood in solidarity with us. But just like Spain, and just like Italy, and just like France, and just like the Netherlands, and just like England, and just like Brazil, and all these other countries and groups and peoples that every time they get a chance to vote now, they're voting to pull out of globalism. They're pulling to have sovereignty again. And all of us should pull together towards national sovereignty, more power to the people, more decentralization. So what we have is the corporate mega banks, the big corporate controlled media that's falling apart, and criminal rogue elements inside these intelligence agencies who've burrowed their way in over the decades, who now are involved in a vicious counter coup against the American people. They had their coup taking over our republic. We had our peaceful coup beginning to restore it and take it back. Now they believe they're going to snatch it back away from us, but they're dead on arrival politically once they've even been able to carry that out. They're hoping to beat up Trump, to bring him to heel, to bully him into submission, to prepare him for the next phase of destabilization of Europe and Russia and this whole global crisis. And he understands from his advisors that they need to move forward with an alliance with Japan, an alliance with Russia against the belligerent, out-of-control China, and that America, Russia, Japan, Australia, you name it, Europe need to come together against radical Islam and communist China, and that those are the real threats in the future. So Trump's getting real military advice from the top generals in this country that actually care about this republic and have a track record of reforming things and getting things done and standing against the whole New World Order agenda. Now I'm going to hand the baton back to Paul Watson, but I got to tell you, this is really an unprecedented time to be alive. Obviously, I believe that they're still going to try to keep Trump out of office, but the support for that is crumbling. So we're still in dire straits, but not as bad as we were a week ago or 2 weeks ago. But if you look at all the ratcheting up you see with the race war garbage and the rest of it, this is a very, very, very serious time to be focused and a time to be reaching out to everybody we know and asking them to spread the word, to have a general understanding of the type of social engineering we're under, because being aware of that is what will defeat it. But in summation, it is outrageous to continue to say, we have the proof of the Russians, we have the proof of the Russians talking to WikiLeaks, we have the proof of them celebrating. Now, none of this is a smoking gun, but blah, blah, blah. Still, Donald Trump's basically a Russian agent, and this whole election's illegitimate. That's the idea they're selling. And so Trump must resist that. They're acting like he's starting a fight with the intelligence community when what he's doing is standing up against criminal elements in it. They're trying to overthrow the will of the American people and plunge the planet into decades more of new Cold Wars and destabilization, while America's real enemies gain power and strength because the globalists are allied with communist China, Saudi Arabia, and the whole Islamic horde. Now, back to Paul Joseph Watson from London, England, transmitting through the InfoWars News Center in Austin, Texas.
And that was Alex Jones. He will be, God willing, joining us again later on in the show. We're going to get back into the Russia news here in a second. But what is going on with Facebook? We know we got this whole fake news narrative that they're trying to exploit for censorship, with the German government threatening Facebook that if they don't remove posts within 24 hours, they'll get massive crippling fines. Well, this has happened to my Facebook now for the second time this week. And this has happened to the Alex Jones Facebook as well. They say that a post has been removed because it violates the community standards. Then they don't tell you what the post was that was removed. And then there's a yes, no button that says, do you want to unpublish your entire page? They don't even tell you what you posted, which was supposedly contravened their rules. Absolute. And again, if you get too many of these, they just shut down your page altogether. Another thing with Facebook, as this censorship increases, and this is going to accelerate in 2017, you can bet your bottom dollar. A new thing on Facebook, you post something, and then it sends you a message saying that we reviewed this post and found that it follows Facebook community standards, so it doesn't even violate their terms of agreement. It's perfectly acceptable, but it may be considered insensitive or cruel. You may want to consider removing the post. So one person finds a post offensive, they log you out of your account, they make you go through a security check, And again, they don't even tell you. They've now stopped telling you what the posts are that are supposedly offensive. So how on earth are you meant to abide by their rules if you don't even know what rules you're breaking? So we're trying to dig into this. It's the second time that it's happened this week. Some weird stuff going on with Facebook. Again, we have to compete on their battlefield. That's why we're on Facebook. That's why we're trying to reach more and more people. But the censorship is intensifying. Let's dip back into the Russian news. Again, we got BBC reporting US identifies agents behind Russian hack. They've identified them. Not going to tell us who they are, but just trust them. They've identified them. Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse, no doubt. The Russian agents are alleged to have sent stolen Democratic emails to WikiLeaks to try and swing the vote for Mr. Trump. Well, WikiLeaks has a 10-year reputation of complete transparency and honesty. In fact, there was a poll tweeted out by, I think it was an NBC journalist earlier today. He asked who was more trustworthy, given that he was exposed in the WikiLeaks emails as being a sycophant for the Hillary campaign, like dozens of other journalists. He asked which was more trustworthy, the US intelligence community or WikiLeaks. I think the last time I looked at it, it was 75-25 for WikiLeaks. There we have it there. If you vote in that poll, it will tell you the latest numbers. The last time I looked at it, it was pretty heavily in favor of WikiLeaks. But again, they're still trying to push this narrative. The article continues. According to CNN, the Washington Post, again, which reported fake news about Russia hacking the US electric grid with no evidence, citing intelligence sources. Again, no evidence. Agencies had intercepted communications following the election which showed senior Russian government officials celebrating Donald Trump's win over Hillary Clinton. Again, celebrating an election win is not proof of hacking an election, okay? NBC. Of course, we have the Obama administration prosecuting whistleblowers like no other administration in US presidential history because of leakers, vilifying Julian Assange and WikiLeaks because they leaked intelligence information that was handed to them, now leaking intelligence information to NBC, but it's perfectly fine when they do it. Joe Biden told the PBS network that he had read, you can trust Joe Biden, he's read it, he had read a US intelligence report that clearly confirmed Russia had tried to, quote, discredit the US electoral process. Okay, so now it's not even hacking, it's discrediting. So it's basically having an opinion on something. On Thursday, General Clapper, who lied under oath, remember, told a hearing of the Senate Armed Services Committee that Russian President Vladimir Putin had ordered the hack, and the motive would be revealed next week. And, of course, next week there'll be another report in the Washington Post about another report about a claim by the intelligence community, and that will be the bombshell evidence, I guess, because that's all we've been given so far. Listen to this is out of the BBC. The pro-Kremlin media line is that the US authorities have failed to present any evidence to substantiate their presidential campaign hacking accusations. All right, so anyone who says that there's no evidence that has been presented to substantiate these accusations, anyone who says that is pro-Kremlin. Well, no, BBC, that is the objective truth because no evidence has been presented. So you don't have to be pro-Kremlin to believe that. The article continues. The Washington Post, David Ignatius, views the coming days as a test to see how supportive of the intelligence system Trump really is. There you see the exact propaganda Alex was talking about in that previous clip. They're trying to set Trump up as an adversary to the intelligence community when we know that this is a politicized rogue element within the intelligence community that's basically a Democratic Party front. It's a rogue element. I mean, they complained about a rogue element inside the intel community when other intel agents came out and blew the whistle and said they were not being given the tools to fight ISIS. This is not one single entity. It's not united. These are rogue elements. So again, they're trying to set it up adversarially so it's Trump against the intel community to try and portray him as un-American, anti-patriotic. It won't work. We'll be back live. Stay tuned. Well, the mainstream media really is so discredited at this point that it just keeps on doubling down again and again and again. And that's what you're seeing with this Russian hysteria. We've been going through this BBC article about They've supposedly identified the Russian agents that hacked the DNC and John Podesta's email, and you just got to trust them on that. Not going to tell you who they are. Maybe next week, maybe not. The article continues. Fox News' Chris Stirewalt says that after James Clapper, who lied under oath, after James Clapper's testimony, because you can trust him, it is clear that the nation's spies are not going to let Trump and co. off the hook here. Their competency, integrity, and patriotism have been called into question, and they are not going to let the matter to be tabled. So again, you see the narrative. It's Trump versus the intel community. Those brave souls who put their lives on the line for their nation, for their country. Trump versus those guys, right? Trump must be bad. Well, no, it's a rogue element inside, and they've presented no evidence whatsoever. But Donald Trump is not patriotic if he even dares to question this. Again, after all the hot air, all the MSM hysteria, precisely zero evidence that Russia hacked the US presidential election has been presented. Zero evidence has been presented that they hacked John Podesta's emails. You saw the congressman get completely owned by Tucker Carlson several weeks ago when Tucker said, look in the camera and say that you've seen evidence, and he's supposedly party to these intelligence briefings. Look in the camera, say you've seen evidence that Russia, Vladimir Putin, hacked John Podesta's emails. He couldn't do it. He was completely exposed and embarrassed. So they can't even lie about it. When they're nailed down on specifics, they don't even want to say it themselves. They're saying, oh, we might present the evidence next week. Week after week after week, this goes on with absolutely nothing to back it up. Is it just about delegitimizing Trump? Is it about actually trying to stop the transfer of power here in a couple of weeks? I'm going to talk about that with Roger Stone in the next segment, but NBC News reports top Russians celebrated when Trump won, Intel report says. A senior U.S. intelligence official with direct knowledge confirmed to NBC News that the report on Russian hacking delivered to President Obama Thursday says that U.S. intelligence picked up senior Russian officials celebrating Donald Trump's win. Well, what a surprise. They were celebrating somebody who said he wanted to normalize relations with Russia and not have a second Cold War. You think they'd be pleased about that? I'd be pleased about that. I'd be pleased about humanity not being plunged into World War III with Hillary Clinton, the woman who said, even if there was a suggestion of Russian cyber hacking, that she would direct military assets against Russia. So of course they're going to be pleased if Trump wins. That isn't evidence of hacking. The source described the intelligence about the celebration first reported by the Washington Post, which reported that Russia hacked the US electric grid with no evidence, didn't happen, had to come out the next day and admit it didn't happen, as a minor part of the overall intelligence report, which makes the case that Russia intervened in the election. Highly classified intercepts illustrate Russian government planning and direction of a multifaceted campaign by Moscow to undermine the integrity of the American political system, said the official, again, presenting absolutely no evidence to back it up. And again, we have this irony of Obama leaking intel information to NBC News while for 8 years vigorously, aggressively prosecuting whistleblowers, people who leaked intelligence information. We'll be back with more on the Alex Jones Show live, breaking news at Infowars.com. Don't go away. We're going to get into how Donald Trump himself is responding to all these allegations here in a moment. But first, I want to talk to you about an exciting new product we've got at InfoWarsStore.com. It is tactical nanotechnology body armor. Again, previously only available to military and law enforcement. We've been working with some of the top special operators in the United States to source the absolute highest quality and affordable body armor out there. We had a team of former Blackwater operators and Army Rangers analyze this for us. We tested hundreds of different body armor technologies for their stopping power and safety. And InfoWars is excited to announce we have partnered up with National Defense Laboratories to bring you an advanced nanotechnology body armor that until now was only available to US military and law enforcement. It's cutting edge. It uses a patented form of carbon nanotube technology that makes it the lightest, strongest, and most flexible body armor on the market. It's a game-changing body armor, the best we've come across, the best we can find. It's waterproof, super lightweight, made in the USA, comes with a 20-year warranty. And we have other products as well with the exclusive line of tactical nanotechnology body armor. Previously, again, only available to U.S. military and law enforcement at InfoWarsStore.com. There you see the selection of great products again. The government is preparing for unrest. In fact, we've got a professor who's predicting massive unrest in the run-up to 2020 and beyond. We're going to cover that story later. So top experts are predicting this. The elite are buying panic rooms. They're buying island shelters. They're preparing. So why shouldn't you at least make your own small preparations? We've got all the other great products, 5-star reviews. The InfoWars storable food we've also got up there. It's all available at InfoWarsStore.com, and it helps us fight the constant attacks that we face on a daily basis from the establishment and from the mainstream media. New York Times reports Trump says focus on Russian hacking is a political witch hunt. President-elect Donald J. Trump said in an interview Friday that the storm surrounding Russian hacking during the presidential campaign is a political witch hunt being carried out by his adversaries, who he said were an embarrassment by their loss to him in the election last year. Trump spoke to the New York Times by telephone for 3 hours before he went in for the intelligence briefing. He said, quote, China relatively recently hacked 20 million government names, referring to the breach of computers at the Office of Personnel Management in 2014 and 2015. How come nobody even talks about that? This is a political witch hunt, and that's exactly right. They're not concerned about the actual giant hacking operations that have taken place, that have been allowed to happen by the sheer incompetence of the Obama administration. But as soon as there's political grist to be made, they're right in there with the narrative repeated day after day after day with no evidence whatsoever to back it up. And of course, Lindsey Graham has got involved. Real Clear Politics reports Graham at Russia hearing it is time not to throw pebbles, but to throw rocks. Because that doesn't sound like Kim Jong-il at all, does it? Flagrantly threatening a nuclear superpower just on a whim. Senator Lindsey Graham addresses the allegations of Russian hacking. This is what he said. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time now not to throw pebbles, but to throw rocks. I wish we were not here. If it were up to me, we would all live in peace. Really? Is that why you hawk for every war going imaginable every single time? But Putin is up to no good, and he needs to be stopped. Again, it sounds like a 6-year-old child. This is a guy who's talking about a nuclear-armed superpower. Mr. President-elect, when you listen to this, you can be skeptical, but understand, they're the intelligence community, the best among us. They're trying to protect us. Again, that same old BS once again. We know this is a politicized rogue element. Other elements, the larger body of the intelligence community doesn't even agree with them. This is about delegitimizing Trump. There's no evidence whatsoever to back it. Present the damn evidence already. Stop droning on about absolutely nothing. We'll be back with Roger Stone after the break. Infowars.com. We are live in the second hour of this Friday edition of the Alex Jones Show. Alex will be popping in with an update, God willing, next hour. But for the moment, we turn to someone who will be familiar to all of you out there. He is political consultant and strategist, Roger Stone. Roger, welcome back.
Paul, great to be here.
Now, I want to talk about, again, this Russian hysteria. We see it every single day. We've got this NBC News leak. The intel was supposedly leaked to them. Again, echo chamber of dodgy, evidence-free intelligence just bouncing back and forth between anonymous sources and the mainstream media. Every single time we get this, every single time they fail to present actual evidence. Roger, isn't it amazing that the Obama administration has waged this 8-year war on leakers and whistleblowers, you know, has demonized people like Julian Assange and WikiLeaks for leaking intelligence, and now they're leaking intelligence to the mainstream media?
Now, look, the entire thing is a farce. The U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee hearing yesterday, run by establishment stooge John McCain, was laughable. McCain admits that all of their information is based on assessments by the 17 intelligence agencies, all of them politically controlled by Barack Obama. No Republican member of the House or Senate Intelligence Committee, people who are fully qualified to see classified documents, have seen any proof. What we have are the claims of people like CIA Director John Brennan, a Wahhabist who is most likely a Saudi mole, a man who refused to utilize the Bible when he took the oath of CIA director, or Mike Mullins, a discredited former director who cleaned up the Clintons' paper trail on Benghazi. These are the people telling us we've been hacked by the Russians. They have produced no proof whatsoever, but endless hysteria and claims, none of which are yet proven by anyone.
Let me read to you what Chris Steyerwalt of Fox News said. This is really obvious what they're trying to go with here. After James Clapper's testimony, who of course lied under oath, let's not forget that, he said, quote, "It's clear the nation's spies are not going to let Trump and co. off the hook here. Their competency, integrity, and patriotism have been called into question, and they're not going to let the matter be tabled." So, Roger, they're trying to frame it as any question whatsoever, any demand for evidence by Trump or by any Trump supporters is evidence that they're unpatriotic. How basic a narrative is that?
Well, it's the reflection of the entire narrative from the beginning. Paul, you see, this is the new McCarthyism. When I opposed thermonuclear war with the Russians over Syria, the Clintonistas say I'm a traitor to my country, a non-patriotic American supporting the agenda of a foreign power. I grew up in the anti-communist movement. I hated the Russian system then. I hate the Russian system now. But the idea that if you don't support the neocons' rush to war over Syria, that you're a traitor to your country, it's insulting. Hillary Clinton tried it on Donald Trump, and the voters didn't buy it.
I mean, it's amazing that Democrats are doing this now. After, for decades, the left, flung that allegation at the right. Oh, if you criticize anyone, you're a communist. Same with the war on terror under Bush. The left were incensed that they would be charged with being in league with the terrorists. George Bush gave the famous speech, "You're either with us or you're with the terrorists." That absolutely incensed the left, and rightly so at the time. I supported them. But now if anyone questions this intelligence, they're with the Russians. You had Tucker Carlson interviewing the Democratic congressman who saw the intelligence, on his Fox News show, and he said, "Why don't you go and get a show on RT?" Again, couldn't look in the camera, couldn't say definitively that he'd seen any evidence that the Russians had hacked John Podesta's emails. It's absolutely insane that they're still pushing this narrative. Then you have Lindsey Graham. This is somebody who, during this hearing yesterday, literally sounded like Kim Jong-il from 10 years ago, calling on Donald Trump to, quote, throw rocks at Russia. I mean, Roger, at what point does his rhetoric itself represent a national security threat, given how unhinged Lindsey Graham sounds right now?
Look, Lindsey Graham is like the mini-me for Senator John McCain. He is a war at any costs fellow whose general foreign policy is send troops and let's find out what this is about later. He has been a consistent drumbeater for numerous foreign adventures that have cost both American millions and lives. And he's a camp boy follower for Senator John McCain. These people are smarting over their defeat by Donald Trump. McCain had a great big nothing burger. I listened to his hearings. He has briefings from the CIA. He has assessments. But no one has seen proof of Russian hacking. Indeed, we are told by Craig Murray, the UK veteran diplomat, that human intelligence, that he was involved in the passage of the Democratic National Committee leaks to WikiLeaks, which were not hacked material, but most likely purloined, for which I believe Seth Rich took 4 in the back, in all honesty. So it is the entire narrative is an extraordinary one.
And again, I mentioned a poll earlier that I think it was an NBC journalist was running. Who do you trust more, the US intel community and WikiLeaks? Of course, they're trying to set it up as an adversarial thing, Trump versus the intel community.
But shall we just look at this from a historical point of view? They lied about the Kennedy assassination. They lied about Vietnam. They lied about Benghazi. They lied about the excesses in South America in the 70s. They were brought to heel by President Jimmy Carter, but the many CIA veterans that he fired had their revenge when they returned under Ronald Reagan. It's a rogue agency. Why would we believe anything that they say? They have an agenda quite different than that of the American people.
It's not a great track record, is it, to be honest? One thing, though, that cropped up, again, of course, we had the accusations that the emails were passed to WikiLeaks by Russia. No evidence whatsoever. Assange denied it again in the Sean Hannity interview. He also mentioned, Sean Hannity asked him about you, whether you had met with him. Let's clear that up right now. Now, you say you haven't met with them. Let's clear that up. I have never on any occasion claimed that I had met with him. I had never claimed that we had directly communicated, spoken on the phone, on the net, or otherwise. I simply said that we had a mutual friend, someone that was a friend of mine that I had a high regard for, and someone who he had a high regard for. This person is a libertarian, a free thinker. He's quite a chap. He told me several things that Assange had told him, such as Assange and WikiLeaks had unspecified political dynamite. That says nothing of John Podesta or Russian money laundering or the Clinton Foundation, simply that the information was politically devastating. The idea that I knew in advance the subject matter or the timing of anything WikiLeaks and Julian Assange chose to do is a lie. But it's a recycled refrain of the left who want to make the WikiLeaks disclosures the product of Russian activities, which they are not, and which Assange himself has said repeatedly they were not. And they've lied repeatedly about Assange as well. We had CNN insinuating that he was a paedophile. They had to withdraw that after WikiLeaks threatened legal action. We had The Guardian. This
is a classic CIA disinformation dodge, Paul. As you know, they plant him with some girl who he meets presumably in a pub, and she's in a randy mood, and they have a good time, and then she turns out to be an asset. They're charging him with a crime. This is a setup. This is so classic British intelligence. It's an absurdity. Assange does not work for any nation state. He's not particularly fond of the Russians. I don't think he particularly likes the United States or China either, on the basis of many abuses that he knows about. But in my view, he is a patriot, not a stooge for Vladimir Putin.
And he's not particularly a fan of Donald Trump either. That's what we have to remember. Assange was bashed by the right, by the likes of Fox News for years and years when he kept releasing the Iraq footage, for example, back in 2010. The Guardian lied about him. They took an interview he did with, I think it was an Italian newspaper, and tried to frame it as if he was directly supporting Trump and being a cheerleader for Trump. Complete nonsense. They took a complete mistranslation of the interview. Again, had to retract the article. They get caught over and over again.
In all honesty, Paul, I'm actually quite confident that if Assange had had negative material from the email files of Donald Trump, he'd have published it. Trump, as you know, quite famously does not use email. So would there be very little to find? But it was the Clintons who were in government for 30 years, and that's why their information is important.
That's right. Hold that thought, Roger. We'll be back after the break. This is the Alex Jones Show live, Infowars.com. We're live on the Alex Jones Show with Roger Stone. By the way, I want to get that Charles Schumer clip ready where he basically, in a mafia-style way, threatens Donald Trump, says the intel community will take its revenge. Let's get that queued up. I want to get Roger's reaction to that. Before we go back to Roger, I want to remind you again about the 2017 Make Our Bodies Great Again initiative at InfoWarsLife.com. This was a historical year just gone with the historic victory of Donald J. Trump. But the globalists are going to come back even stronger in 2017, so you've got to be strong. Basically, to have any impact, have any success in this information war, it's going to take a toll on your body, and these products really help you re-energize, read the 5-star reviews, get the discounts currently in place with the 2017 super sale on all our top InfoWars Life formulations, which include Super Male Vitality, Secret 12, 30 and 20% off, Liver Shield, 20% off, Survival Shield X2, 30% off, Knockout, 20% off, ProstaGuard, 20% off, and Brain Force, 30% off. And of course, if you sign up for the re-ups, then you can get them delivered on a regular basis without having to keep going back to the website again and again. So you will never forget to replenish your supplies. That is the 2017 Make Our Bodies Great Again super sale special at InfoWarsLife.com. It not only maintains us, it helps us grow. You know, we lose reporters, we gain reporters. We're constantly having to pay for flights, pay for hotel rooms, pay for new equipment to upgrade everything. It's at great expense, and you've seen how far we've come. We've accelerated in our growth, and it's solely down to your support. And it works well both ways. You get the great products. We get to remain independent. This is key. They constantly try and bash us for selling products. God forbid we would sell nutritional supplements. Meanwhile, they're selling advertising to Prozac producers. You know, George Soros is funding Black Lives Matter to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. CNN is taking money from Gulf state dictatorships, but we're bad for selling nutritional products. Well, we're proud of the products. The people who've got them say they work. You can read the independent reviews, and it all goes to help support the growth of this network. It is the 2017 Make Our Bodies Great Again initiative at InfoWarsLife.com. Let's go back to Roger Stone now. Do we have that Chuck Schumer clip ready? We got it ready. Let's roll it.
You see the scare quotes there. The intelligence briefing on so-called Russian hacking was delayed until Friday. Perhaps more time needed to build a case. Very strange. We're actually told, intelligence sources tell NBC News since this tweet has been posted, that actually this intelligence briefing for the president-elect was always planned for Friday. It hasn't been delayed. But he's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
What do you think the intelligence community would do if they were motivated?
I don't know, but from what I am told, they are very upset with how he has treated them and talked about them. And we need the intelligence community. We don't know what's going on. Look at the Russian hacking. Without the intelligence community, we wouldn't have discovered it.
Do you think he has an agenda to try to dismantle parts of the intelligence community? I mean, this form of taunting, hostility.
Whether you're a super liberal Democrat or a very conservative Republican, you should be against dismantling the intelligence community.
Roger Stone, you heard the thinly veiled threat there. What do you make of that?
First of all, that was an extraordinary exchange. The intelligence community needs to be revamped, reorganized, and completely rethought because they have failed us repeatedly, lied to us about important, significant issues such as Benghazi, the rise of ISIS. They have undermined President-elect Trump at every turn, and now they understand that he intends to restructure the entire information structure of the national security apparatus, defense, intelligence, which will now override 7 different agencies, because Trump is going to depoliticize these agencies which have been abused by Obama. Now, this scares the bejesus out of the professional intelligence community. Trump is speaking openly about cutting the number of personnel at Langley. He has, I think, a low regard for a branch of government that sought to undermine his election and has yet to be honest with him, most likely, since he has attended his first briefing. He's right to be deeply suspicious, and they fear an overhaul. And Trump understands the need to do exactly that. If I were John Brennan, I would not want to be riding too high.
We'll be back to talk about it live. Stay right there, Roger, on the Alex Jones Show. Breaking news at Infowars.com. Be back. We are live on the Alex Jones Show. Some breaking news, which is up on drudgereport.com on the right-hand side. Red linked out of the Daily Mail. 9 shot, 1 dead in shooting at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood Airport. The shooting has reportedly happened at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood Airport. Sources tell MSNBC there were 9 shot, 1 person has died. The shooter is reportedly in custody. Video from the airport this afternoon showed hundreds of passengers corralled together on the tarmac. It's not clear whether the incident happened inside or outside the building. Former White House press secretary Ari Fleischer was at the airport at the time and tweeted about the chaos. He said the scene was now settled, but police aren't letting anyone out of the airport, at least not the area where I am. If you go to my Twitter, I've just retweeted a photo from the scene that's described as somebody bleeding profusely. Whether this is a terrorist attack, whether it's a personal dispute, remains to be seen. 9 injured, 1 dead. Unfortunately, death tolls in these situations tend to rise. But thankfully, according to reports, the shooter is in custody. So we'll continue to keep you updated with developments on that. Going back to Roger Stone, though, with Trump, with Russia, the hysteria we've been talking about.
Well,
Roger, you tweet. Go ahead, Roger. Yeah.
Let's address Fort Lauderdale. Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel is a particularly capable law enforcement officer, and crime in the largest urban county here in South Florida has been down dramatically in every category. I have a high confidence in his ability to get control of the terrible situation at the airport. Most interestingly, Chuck Schumer said, incredibly, well, if it weren't for the Intelligence Committee, we wouldn't know about the Russian hacking. You played the clip twice. What Russian hacking, Chuck? These people provide no evidence whatsoever. This is essentially, I think most of us know, to the extent that there is hacking, it's being done by the NSA and the CIA. Those who would seriously hack us, the Chinese, the Saudis, the Israelis, many of whom hacked us because our Secretary of State was so stupid as to use an unsecure server, are more sophisticated than the Russians. And yet there is no proof whatsoever of this entire Russian narrative that the left has tried to flog as a way to delegitimize Trump's election and perhaps forestall his swearing in.
And they keep getting caught out again and again. It keeps bouncing back and forth between the intel community and the mainstream media. But they keep getting embarrassed. The Washington Post came out last week with a story claiming that Russia had hacked the U.S. electric grid with no evidence whatsoever. They didn't even call the utility company. Had to come out the next day, tail between their legs, and admit that no, Russia didn't hack the U.S. electric grid. That is the kind of damaging, salacious claim that could cause an actual military conflict if it was allowed to escalate. I mean, Roger, how ironic is it that the Washington Post lectures us every day about fake news while they continually publish fake news stories about Russia with no evidence?
Well, and the performance of John McCain in that hearing yesterday was ludicrous pandering, leading the CIA and James Clapper through a series of self-serving statements in which no one yet provides any proof. We are continually told about briefings and assessments. I don't think that makes the grade in this case. So this was the Clinton campaign talking points narrative prior to the campaign, and nothing has really changed. Podesta and these other criminals have just picked up the same meme and run with it. I think Donald Trump's had enough. I think he's going to have an entire overhaul and reform of our intelligence apparatus. You know, it is most interesting, Paul, that shortly after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, President Harry Truman wrote an op-ed piece for the Washington Post saying that signing the CIA into law was the greatest single mistake he had made, and that it had become a rogue agency that was now far afield of its alleged domestic law enforcement responsibilities. The Washington Post was so tightly controlled by the CIA that Truman's piece ran for one edition only and was spiked. Think of that. A former president of the United States censored because he points out that the CIA is out of control.
And again, they were intimately involved in Operation Mockingbird, which was all about putting out fake news on behalf of the intelligence community. I wanted to ask you, though, about a tweet you made earlier today. You're concerned about last-minute plans to stop a transfer of power to Trump with the inauguration coming up in a couple of weeks' time. After all their failures, you know, the recount, the riots, this Russian narrative that just isn't playing with the American people, do you think they're still attempting to pull something that could suspend the inauguration, or are they all out of ammunition at this point?
Well, we have run through an entire litany of strategy that started with harping on the popular vote, then focused solely on the recount in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, which provided exactly nothing. Zero, a net gain of votes for Donald Trump. Then there was this assault on the Electoral College where individual Trump electors or Republican electors were threatened with murder and worse if they exercised their constitutional duty to cast their vote for Donald Trump. All of these stratagems pushed by George Soros, fanned by David Brock, have failed. What concerns me, Paul, as you know, is the infiltration of some of the radical groups who will be trying to turn Washington upside down during the inaugural. Freedom fighters that I know have infiltrated the organization, I think it is DJ-20, which is a front group of radical student and paid agitators who plan to disrupt the inauguration of Trump with a bunch of Alinsky-style guerrilla tactics. They will be assaulting people getting off public transportation. They will be making an all-out effort to drown out speakers with drums. They plan to have women, roller derby experienced women with boxing gloves, assaulting voters. They admit they wish to cause chaos and panic. So we know that there are going to be efforts in Washington to provoke those who are there to celebrate the Trump inauguration. The alternative community, the libertarian activist community, has its own deplorable on the evening of the 19th. This is the people's inaugural event. Alex Jones will be speaking. I will be speaking. The great Mike Cernovich will be speaking. A number of Trump supporters will be enjoying our own celebration of this historic election. The actual inaugural festivities, including the swearing in, are planned, and I have no doubt that they will pull off without a hitch. It is important to note that the inauguration itself, the swearing-in ceremony, is controlled not by President-elect Trump, but by the U.S. Congress. And access to those tickets and that seating and those arrangements is at the sufferance of the Congress. This promises to be a historic opportunity. And I really ask you, if you can, they may be sold out, but I think they're working on that. Join us at the Deplorable. I think this will be the event of the season.
And we're showing the website up on screen for people interested in that event. Yeah, we had an article up on InfoWars in relation to what you were talking about before. Domestic terrorist communists declare war on fascist Trump regime. It reads, the most radical extremists in the United States have launched a desperate battle plan against Donald Trump and his supporters in the last days before he takes office. This is a group called Refuse Fascism, who say they're refusing fascism by acting like fascists, led by domestic terrorist Bill Ayers and black Marxist Cornel West, who are spearheading a final effort to block Trump's inauguration. And as you said, it's all very vague in their promotional material because they don't want to indicate that they're blatantly planning criminal behavior. But we've seen what they do. We saw it in Chicago. We know the plan by now. It's DNC funded. It's right from the very top. They go there, they pay mentally ill, unstable people to start fights, to create a security scare that convinces authorities that they have to shut down the entire event. They believe that that gives them legitimacy and that it illegitimizes, in this case, Donald Trump. We've seen those tactics before, and they're going to try them again, Roger.
Well, I think it's significant that Bill Ayers is like the proverbial bad penny popping up again. First of all, let me point out to your listeners, he's 117 years old. Also is the fact that Dr. Cornel West, who supported Bernie Sanders, never seemed to be terribly upset about the plight of Danny Williams, the abandoned African-American son of Bill Clinton, banished by Hillary. Cornel, where you been? So the hypocrisy of these leftist, anarchists is somewhat entertaining. But the people have spoken, and I think their great march on Washington and their attempt to disrupt the proceedings there are going to be an abysmal failure. People are tired of this entire trail of paid, agit-propped, phony demonstrators paid by Mr. Soros, directed by David Brock, who represent exactly nobody. I mean, if I were George Soros, I would want my $30 million back from David Brock. Their entire campaign to smear Donald Trump and Roger Stone and Alex Jones has been an abysmal failure because it is not about us. It was always about America. It was always about the last best shot at liberty for this country. I don't think they understand that, Paul.
They've really took failing to a brand new height. And to back that up, what you were saying, it's just not working. We got this article out of Truth Revolt. Unity. 73% of Americans want Trump to succeed, despite claims from Democrats like Michael Moore that Trump has no mandate. A new Rasmussen Report survey shows that a wide majority of Americans want Trump to succeed. So 73% of all voters want Trump's presidency to be successful. 57% of them are Democrats. So even a majority of Democrats now want Trump to be successful. 91% of Republicans want him to be successful. So you've got, 9% of never-Trumpers in there. So again, Roger, he's resonating with the American people. His approval ratings have gone up since he was elected, since he won the presidential election. This attack led by Michael Moore and these agitators that he has no mandate, that he represents a danger, a threat to the United States, to the world, not resonating with the American people when you look at the polls.
Yeah, I think it is. This is a dead issue as far as the American people are concerned. I heard on WBAI in New York today that demonstrators marched on Salomon Brothers in protest of Trump's economic policies. I wish I had been there. I would have joined the march. I don't like the folks at Solomon Brothers, and I'm actually disappointed to see a few too many of them in the Trump administration. But the idea that Trump is going to abandon his pro-growth, very dynamic, pro-American trade and tax policies to reignite this economy in favor of some traditional Wall Street, Robert Rubin model of trying to manage lower expectations in the economy is the great danger that lies ahead. Trump must be the bold leader he was in the campaign. He must cut the corporate tax rate below that of Mexico and China. He must negotiate hard-headed trade deals with our partners. He has to prop up the dollar, and he has to really fight for American jobs. I think he's up to all of that.
Bit of breaking news, by the way. We had the official vote count today. This was one of the final stages that people like Michael Moore identified as a possible point where they could convince people to basically not only vote against their conscience, vote against the law. Congress has now counted the votes, and yes, Donald Trump once again is president of the United States. So we've won once again. Roger, we've got a couple of minutes here. Final comments. Did you have a comment on the Black Lives Matter inspired torture of the man in Chicago there? Obama says race relations in the United States have never been better. Do you have a take on that?
Listen, Valerie Jarrett actually said last week that she was very proud of the fact that the Obama administration had been scandal-free. What planet does this woman live on? We have, among other things, Fast and Furious, the smuggling of guns, the manipulation of the IRS against the political opponents of the administration, the spying by the U.S. intelligence agencies against James Rosen, a duly authorized reporter for Fox News, something far more egregious than Richard Nixon ever did, wiretapping a reporter. We had the cover-up of Benghazi. We had the rise of ISIS and the truth of ISIS's creation and who armed them. We have taken literally millions from the Clinton Foundation. Pardon me, restate that. The Clinton Foundation has taken literally millions from oppressive regimes like Oman and Saudi and Qatar and others who oppress gays, who oppress women. They had to fire General Flynn and replace him with CIA Director Brennan, essentially, after Brennan cleansed the passport files of President Barack Obama. This is scandal-free. That is a trail of crime by anybody's book.
Okay, we're going to leave it there, Roger. We're coming up hard on the break, but again, thanks for joining us. Again, look up information on the deplorable, as Roger said, and we'll be sure to get Roger back on the show. Check him out on Twitter as well. Breaking news coming up next hour of the Alex Jones Show, Infowars.com. Update on the situation in Fort Lauderdale, and Alex Jones will be on in the next hour to discuss this amongst other issues. This is out of CBS Miami. The death toll has risen to 3 people. As I said, that's normally what happens. If you read 1 dead, 9 injured, it normally means more dead in the long run. Unfortunately, 3 people have died after a shooting at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. Authorities say someone opened fire around 1 p.m. in the baggage claim area of Terminal 2. Multiple patients were taken to the hospital. At least 1 was taken to Broward General Hospital. Chopper 4 was over the scene as travelers were being shuffled around the tarmac near the Delta Airlines terminal around 1 p.m. Crime scene tape was also up in the arrival area of the airport. Airport officials are only saying there's an ongoing incident. Federal Aviation Administration officials said the south side of the airport is operating, but not the north side where the incident happened. And they're saying that the shooter is now in custody, which I guess would suggest, without knowing any evidence so far, that it's not Islamic terrorism. Normally, if it's Islamic terrorism, they tend to fight to the death, or they commit suicide or suicide by cop. They normally wouldn't allow themselves to be taken into custody. But again, it remains to be seen who they pin this on. Granted that it will require more TSA groping in the long run. That's what they will try and get out of it. But at the moment, reports say 9 shot, 3 dead, and the shooter is in custody right now. So we'll continue to update you on that story as it develops. Let's hit a few more stories here in the final couple of minutes of this segment. Again, Alex Jones is coming up in the next segment. Daily Caller reports Washington Post worries videotape torture provides evidence of anti-white racism. Again, they're more worried about the fact that this video contravenes their narrative than their concern for the actual victim. Just like CNN is more triggered over my tweets than what happened to the victim as he was tortured, kidnapped, abused, humiliated for 48 hours. Washington Post writer Callum Borchers believes one of the worst aspects of the brutal videotape torture of a mentally handicapped white man at the hands of black assailants is that it gives credence to a, quote, pro-Trump narrative that whites face rampant discrimination in America. In a column published on the Fix blog Thursday, Borchers argued, quote, if you believe discrimination against white people is rampant, that Donald Trump supporters face persecution, well, there's been quite a few examples of that, hasn't there? In fact, we featured one out of Chicago just a few months back where the guy was literally dragged as he hung onto his car by people accusing him of, God forbid, voting for Donald Trump, even though he didn't even vote for Donald Trump. And the media is dishonest, then your entire worldview is likely to be confirmed by one awful story. So he's saying that this one story in isolation confirms the hate crime attacks that have been launched against Donald Trump supporters, despite the fact that, as we documented over months and months and months, there have been innumerable violent attacks against Donald Trump supporters, no less at his rallies, funded and organized by the DNC itself, as James O'Keefe highlighted. But again, he's more concerned over an InfoWars headline, white man kidnapped, gagged, beaten by racist black anti-Trump gang, and former House Speaker Newt Gingrich's reaction to the news. So another example of the lying, dishonest, fake news media being more outraged over tweets, being more outraged over headlines than actual violent, racist hate crimes, which Don Lemon of CNN said was not evil, and it was just kids who hadn't had good home training, whatever that means, and guests on CNN who again said that it was not racially motivated, not a hate crime, as they literally shout F white people while they're cutting out chunks of his scalp. We'll be back live on the Alex Jones Show. Third hour coming right up. Stay tuned. We're live on the Alex Jones Show. Coming up in the next segment, before Alex joins us, we're going to play one of my videos that I put up a few days ago. The truth about depression. I'm going to get into a discussion about how mainstream pop culture is glorifying, even fetishizing depression, which is why more and more people are falling prey to it, with now 1 in 10 Americans taking antidepressants. So we're going to delve into that subject. For the moment, though, we have this headline up on Infowars.com from this morning. And we got a video clip on this, which we can play in a moment. Obama says race relations have gotten better. This was his response to the brutal kidnap and racist torture of a mentally disabled 18-year-old boy, basically, at a mental age of a child there in Chicago. He denounced it. Fair enough. He said it was terrible. But then he made a bizarre claim that race relations have gotten better. Let's play the clip.
I promise you, for the most part, race relations have gotten better. But I think what we've seen over the last several years when it comes to tensions between police and communities, the internet, horrific hate crimes of the sort that we appear to have seen
on
this
Facebook.
recent,
Yeah, what is your reaction to that,
today.
actually, to that Facebook video?
It's terrible. And so part of what technology allows us to see now is the terrible toll that racism and discrimination and hate takes on families and communities. But that's part of how we learn and how we get better. We don't benefit from pretending that racism doesn't exist and hate doesn't exist. We don't benefit from not talking about it. The fact that these things are being surfaced means we can solve them.
So there's Obama's response to the racist hate crime attack on the 18-year-old boy in Chicago. He says that race relations under his term have gotten better. Well, that claim is completely contradicted by the facts. Obama just spun another fake news narrative there. If you look at the actual polls, which we quote in this article, Washington Post ABC News poll conducted in July last year found that, quote, more than 6 in 10 adults, that's 63% of the US population, say race relations are generally bad, and a majority say they are getting worse. A CNN ORC poll released in October last year found that 54% of Americans think race relations between blacks and whites have become worse. An 11% increase on a similar poll conducted in June the previous year. Just 16% of Americans said that race relations had gotten better. Then you have a Gallup poll released in November that found 77% of Americans see the country as divided, with just 21% feeling America is united. So when you ask actual Americans how they feel about race relations, it's not great, to say the least. It's definitely not getting better. You have had 2 years of this hateful, divisive Black Lives Matter rhetoric. You've had Obama meeting with Black Lives Matter leaders, even after that same rhetoric inspired riots, inspired shooting of police officers. You had Hillary Clinton meeting with Black Lives Matter leaders, saying that she would be happy to change laws for them. That has done nothing to help race relations in America, because fundamentally BLM is a black supremacist group. It is the black KKK. Has it been responsible for as many deaths as the KKK? Well, no. But it's only been in existence for a couple of years as a movement. Is it a racist extremist group? Definitely. And it's only caused race relations to become worse in America. Going to get more into it after the break, and Alex Jones is coming up. This is the Alex Jones Show, live breaking news at Infowars.com. Stay with us. We are going to go to a special report here in a minute. The truth about depression. Stay tuned for that one. But for the moment, I'm looking at InfoWarsStore.com and I'm looking at InfoWars Life Select. Now, the government is constantly stockpiling food, yet we have this cultural narrative that anybody who does it privately is a complete kook, a doomsday prepper. Well, if the government's doing it, if they're preparing for what's coming, if you've got top experts saying we have societal chaos coming over the next 4 years, which we're going to get to that story later, then it makes complete sense. This has a 30-year shelf life. If nothing happens, you just eat it and you save money anyway. Absolutely huge discounts on InfoWars Life Select storable food. I've tried to buy storable food in Europe, in the UK. Astronomical prices, absolutely ridiculous prices. You would be better off going to a supermarket and buying dried pasta. It's cheaper in the supermarket. It's just not worth the money buying this in the UK, in Europe, compared to the prices that we've got at InfoWarsStore.com. InfoWars Life Select 3-month. That is a $100 discount, almost $4.99 for a 3-month supply. 6-month supply is what? $250 discount, $895 for a 6-month supply. You go up to the 12-month supply, you're talking about, what's this, a $500 discount. Absolutely huge. And again, if nothing happens, 25-year shelf life, you just eat the food and you save money anyway, yet you have that insurance. You know, governments have collapsed in the past, countries have collapsed in the past. Just because we have normalcy bias, just because it hasn't happened within our lifetimes, doesn't mean that it will never happen. Doesn't mean that we won't have problems in the future, especially given that rogue elements of the intelligence community are trying to start a war with Russia, literally, and have been doing for years now. So why shouldn't you prepare by getting the food insurance at InfoWarsLife.com? And it's a complete bargain. Compared to EU prices, forget about it. Excellent bargains again. 4.6, 59 independent reviews, a 4.6 out of 5 rating. We don't write the reviews, folks. Those are independent reviews. Those people have got their InfoWars Life Select. They're happy with it. And massive discounts again on the 3, 6, and 12-month supply. So be sure to go to InfoWarsStore.com to take advantage of that special. Now, unfortunately, the death toll, again, is rising. They're talking about 14 shot, I think was the latest figure. 4 dead now confirmed. Eyewitnesses on MSNBC described the man, slender man, dark hair, according to witnesses. No details on ethnicity, according to the latest information that's coming out of Twitter based off of these reports. Eyewitnesses said that the shooter reloaded his gun and was able to take another shot, another round of shots at a different group of people. You see on the Drudge Report there, at least 4 dead. These death tolls always climb. Thankfully, it appears that they've got the shooter in custody. And again, will they use this for gun control? Will they use this for increased TSA groping? You can bet that somebody is going to try and exploit it for something, unless it turns out to be an Islamic terrorist, and then they will immediately bury it and try and move on very quickly indeed, like we saw after San Bernardino. So we're continuing to track what is happening there in Fort Lauderdale. For the moment, though, we're going to go to this special report, and Alex is going to come up after this. This is the truth about depression. We'll talk about it afterwards. Here's the special report. 1 in 10 Americans are now on antidepressants. 1 in 4 women in their 40s and 50s are on antidepressants. The rate of antidepressant use has increased 400% over the last 2 decades. Blue Monday... No, not that one. Blue Monday, the 3rd week of January, is the most depressing day of the year for people living in the Northern Hemisphere. The weather sucks, you're not getting enough sunlight, causing seasonal affective disorder. You're in the most debt, you're more likely to be sick. Christmas is just a memory, and your New Year's resolutions are already failing. So you're more prone to depression than at any other time of the year. But wait. Those factors have always been in play. None of this explains why depression has become so commonplace in modern society. Well, I'll tell you why. We're bathed in a culture that glorifies and fetishizes depression. It's now a form of virtue signaling to constantly drone on about how depressed you are. You see it all over YouTube, these sniveling hug and confess videos made by privileged millennial brats who haven't had a proper day of hardship in their entire lives. They think they're being edgy, when in fact they're engaging in just another form of basic bitchery.
You're a basic bitch.
Social media has created a generation of young people suffering from narcissistic personality disorder. They try to one-up each other for depression brownie points, with endless blubberfests about their poor privileged lives. Meanwhile, people living in African mud huts literally give 0 f***s. Maladjustment is now trendy, and not in a kind of Morrissey, emo, grunge-esque, chic kind of way. And heaven knows I'm miserable now. We've always had that. I'm talking about this ridiculous idea that we've been forced to swallow, that constantly admitting weakness is a strength. It isn't. Strength of mind is strength. Being constantly brushed off course by the slightest breeze and then having a whining fit about it isn't. They've transformed being anemic, weak-minded, and easily upset into a positive personality trait. This idea that we should all have permanent emotional incontinence. This idea that if we're not constantly sharing the latest chapter in our contrived mental breakdown for all the world to see, that we're somehow cold or inhuman. That's total BS. Bull. Strength of character used to be about the ability to deal with negative stuff without just falling to pieces at the first sign of distress. Now look what they've turned us into. Simpering pussies wallowing in our own misfortune whenever every tiny thing doesn't go our way. Over-eager to share every minor anxiety in a giant self-pitying Facebook post. Oh, but there shouldn't be a stigma around depression anymore. That's mean. Yes, there should. Just as there should be a stigma around smoking and obesity, depression has become the new fat pride movement. Our culture is telling young people that depression is completely normal and should be embraced. You saw the media pushing this same narrative again after the death of Carrie Fisher. Depression is not normal, but allowing yourself to be indoctrinated with this idea that it is the primary reason why you can't beat it. This coerced mental fragility also renders you completely helpless when it comes to dealing with actual tragedy or hardships. They've turned us into complete pussies, because pussies are easier to push around and manipulate.
You're a big fat pussy.
And if you want to blame someone for this, you can trace it back to idiotic French philosophers like Michel Foucault. They pushed this postmodern nihilistic bull that insanity was sanity and that rampant hedonism was the only way to achieve fulfillment and happiness. Logically, the depression epidemic makes no sense. By every single objective factor, it's never been a better time to be a human being living in the West. Even amongst the poorest, our basic needs are met and exceeded. And depression was barely even a thing. It wasn't even talked about 50 or 60 years ago. So why is everyone so depressed now when we've got it so much easier? It's because you've been completely misled about what depression actually is. Depression is nothing more than dissatisfaction with life. It's temporary unhappiness. But the dominant culture in the pharmaceutical industry figured out that it could control people and make tons of money by treating depression as a pathological disease. So now depression is not unhappiness, but a medical condition, which it's the responsibility of the doctor to alleviate by medical means. And they're only too happy to, often being paid to do so, under the insane justification that depression is a chemical imbalance, which it isn't. We've been indoctrinated that everybody has a right to happiness. No, you don't. Happiness is earned by the way you live your life. If you make bad life choices, you become dissatisfied with life. You become depressed, and it's your fault. People make dreadful lifestyle decisions. They're lazy. They self-sabotage. And then they wonder why they still get depressed. You're not entitled to be happy.
You are entitled to nothing.
Your mood cannot be independent of the way you live your life. You can't eliminate dissatisfaction with your life by taking pills. The only cure is to change the way you live your life, to make better decisions, to create value, excitement, and authenticity in your life. Work on projects, start businesses, read, absorb worthwhile information, create something. Listen, I'm not trying to go all Tony Robbins on you. I don't have all the answers, but you need to reach for those higher levels in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because society and the culture that we're subjected to does everything in its power to distract you from achieving self-actualization. You're not going to achieve self-actualization by taking pills or having endless conversations with therapists, most of whom don't give a damn about you anyway. Reject this barbarous, vulgar culture that pretends to offer you everything, yet only ever leaves you empty and isolated. Reject this idea that depression is a fait accompli, that you just have to accept and tolerate. Reject the normalization, glorification, and fetishization of mental illness. That is the truth about depression. It's up on the Prison Planet Live YouTube channel if you want to check that out. We're going to talk about that more later if we have time, but we're going to cover the breaking news out of Fort Lauderdale. Coming up, Alex Jones after the break. Now, unfortunately, 5 confirmed dead in that shooting. More details are beginning to emerge. We'll be back to cover it live after the break on the Alex Jones Show Live. Don't go away.
All right, my friends, Alex Jones here live from the road. Joseph Watson is hosting the transmission, but obviously I am breaking in to give my breakdown and my analysis on a lot of the big current developments happening across the world. First off, in the next segment, we'll get into rogue elements inside Western intelligence agencies that are attempting to delegitimize Trump, and what we can expect in the next 13, 14 days. Also, we'll look at the economy and some of the developments there. But first off, obviously, we have the attack in Florida. Now 5 dead, a whole bunch of people wounded. The numbers are growing. Now, I don't want to say that this was an Islamic attack, but almost every time we've seen these events as of late, it's been an Islamic attack. And the fact that they've had this individual in custody for an hour now, they're not announcing that he's a white Christian male, directs us towards the fact that it's probably Islamic. I'm not saying it's Islamic, but every other time, really in modern history that we've seen, it's been Islamic. There's a call for jihad around the world. We've seen a lot of attacks in Belgium and France and all over Europe, the Middle East, by jihadis. Many of these jihadis have been supported and funded by criminal elements within our government, led by folks like Barack Hussein Obama. So with 13, 14 days out till President Trump is finally seated as president, inaugurated, I expect to see more of this happen. I mean, ISIS, a branch of Al-Qaeda, comes out and says a few months ago, start driving cars into people at Christmas events, and it starts happening. In our media, a week later, still would not say that that was Islamic, just like the Nice attack last year as well. So it's sad that we have to sit here and expect our mainstream media not to tell us the truth and just have to be in the dark because they won't tell us who's done this. Really is sad. Notice when the 5 young black brainwashed hoodlums beat up the mentally retarded, mentally ill white person, doesn't know what planet they're on, the Chicago police try to make excuses for it. Again, this is all part of this move to get minorities, but also get Islamists to go out and cause a destabilization so that the government can bring in draconian systems to crack down on all of our free speech. They're bringing in basically people that do not comport with a free society, while also trying to stir up groups in the country for a larger program of chaos. And we're seeing this ramped up in the 13, 14 days before the president is finally seated. We see the hysteria that obviously Paul's been talking about all day with, oh my gosh, breaking news. We know who gave the intel from Russia to WikiLeaks. And then you read the article with a transcript from Congress and the hearings, and they go, this is not a smoking gun. But the Russians, this is top secret, they celebrated. Some of the Russians celebrated. Well, they publicly celebrated on TV. So did a lot of other countries around the world that want sovereignty. But I think it's very telltale, Paul, that we're not hearing the religion or the ethnicity of this individual. We know from San Bernardino to Fort Hood, we're told over and over again, this is not Islamic, that this is all just rogue. It's not terrorism. This could be a drug deal gone bad. It could be a general crazy person. But I think probably 9 times out of 10, it's a safe bet to say this is Islamic, especially because we're not hearing anything right now about motive, Paul.
Well, they've just named him, according to Florida Senator Bill Nelson. He's just been named. What's more concerning is now reports of a second shooter that's going on, but they've named him as Esteban Santiago, and that's from his military ID. So it looks like someone who was possibly in the military. Esteban Santiago obviously sounds Hispanic. So that's,
keep going, Paul.
That's the latest.
Keep going, Paul. Break that down.
Yeah, the early reports were that a shooter basically unloaded until he had no bullets left. As he said, now kill count is up to 5. He then apparently laid down and just waited to be arrested. So that's why I said earlier that it didn't look Islamic, because normally those people just fight to the death or until they're suicided by a cop or whatever, or they kill themselves. So he just shot until he ran out of bullets. They got him into custody. They arrested him. He's been named as Esteban Santiago. But now reports of more shots being fired, cops taking cover. So it looks like there could be a second shooter. Obviously hope that's not the case, because it's going to mean more deaths. But the latest is that he's been named with a Hispanic sounding name. So it remains to be seen the motive behind this.
Well, I'll tell you this, Paul. If there has been another shooting or another event happening, that would mean that this is coordinated. This is a pretty serious situation. Again, all I've been pointing out is that leading up to this seating of President Trump as the 45th president, his inauguration, we're already seeing all hell break loose because the globalists are moving on every front to block this. Thank you for joining us on this Worldwide Friday edition. Again, I'm Alex Jones from the road. Paul Watson is sitting in doing a fabulous job. Leanne McAdoo and David Knight are coming up in the fourth hour today. Obviously, they'll have more for you on the ongoing crisis in Florida, with at least 5 dead, more than 15 wounded, as of the latest info I have, and more people being shot at right now and police pinned down, reportedly. Paul Joseph Watson is on the latest, conferring with our newsroom. Paul, give us your latest breakdown on what's happening. For me, though, this just fits into this season of hysteria. This could either be, as I was saying earlier, jihadi attacks. Almost all of these have been jihadi attacks. They're told to target Christmas events, target public events, target the queues at airport security, a perfect place to attack. They're also, of course, out there through the whole Black Lives Matter, kill the police movement, calling for a leftist uprising that all major leftist publications have been calling for. We have articles on Infowars.com today with the open leadership of the left, including Bernie Sanders, basically calling for an overthrow inside America while they claim that we're violent. This isn't about left or right, folks. This is just big banks and corporations use the radical left as their control arm to destabilize the country. I personally, just a free market nationalist, capitalist, but this is an incredible time. We don't know yet, but this appears to be organized and bigger than we previously thought. Again, imagine if the Islamic sleeper cells, tens of thousands of them here in the U.S., more than that in Europe, ever start attacking. 5 million people brought in the last 3 years to Europe, almost 3 million to Germany alone, 80% of military-age men, most of them combatants out of Syria. This is incredible. I noticed CNN last week said Islam's going to attack the West now because of Trump, and it's his fault. No. If there is a big jihad uprising, it's the globalists, Hillary, Obama, and all their faults. We, of course, told people 5 years ago that Hillary was creating this Islamic invasion. And now from 3 years ago, we have the leaked audio of John Kerry saying Obama and Hillary wanted ISIS to grow. Well, of course, they're behind it. So if this is part of a sleeper cell attack, we're not saying that's the case, but we're just having to obviously analyze who the prime suspects are and who the media tries to cover up for routinely, sometimes weeks later after it's an admitted Islamic attack, weeks later, even after it's all come out, the media still gets caught trying to cover it up. So, Paul Watson, what's the latest?
The latest is that one of the shooters, at least, has been named as Esteban Santiago, 27 years old by the looks of it, born in 1990. Again, this looked like completely professional hit. He had military ID, shot people in the head, went straight into it, no messing around. But then, surprisingly, and that's why, you know, I said it didn't really resemble Islamic at the beginning, because he laid down and let himself be arrested as soon as he'd run out of bullets. There's panic there. People are running on the tarmac. Reports of more shots inside a garage there at the airport in one of the terminals. According to eyewitnesses, elderly people were the main targets. It seemed like he shot people directly in the head. Absolute bloodshed and carnage. Suspect taken into custody unharmed. Again, he just lied down on the ground when he'd run out of bullets. Witnesses say the shooter wasn't targeting anyone specifically, just shooting as many people as he could. Slender man, dark hair. Again, he's been named as Esteban Santiago. So it remains to be seen. I mean, we've got Trump derangement syndrome sweeping the nation. We've got the mainstream media legitimizing violence across the board. So it remains to be seen what will happen. Obviously, another gun-free zone, Alex, where responsible people aren't allowed to be armed.
Well, that's right. Let me just expand on that. We've seen unfortunate mass shootings before when cars are backfiring or people are wrecking or people are hearing loud noises in hysteria, like fire in a theater. This may not be organized. There may not be shooters in this garage. Again, it could have been a loud noise, could have been a car wreck, could have been a backfire. Let's hope that this is not a larger operation. But again, I ask the question, why would Merkel bring in millions of jihadis into Germany and then let them attack people and say we're going to keep the borders open in a New Year's Eve message? Why would they bring in hundreds of thousands of these people here and then allow Somalis and others to bomb, shoot, and stab folks and then have our media cover it up? What do you think the larger plan is, Paul? And what do you think Obama and the globalists are thinking and trying with only 13, 14 days until Trump gets in?
Well, we know that the fascists who call themselves anti-fascists are openly planning violence. They're planning to shut down the inauguration. So you know, all bets are off at this point. They still haven't given up on stopping Donald Trump becoming president after everything they tried failed. But now, Alex, we still have this hysterical anti-Russian narrative. You know, despite the Washington Post being caught again putting out fake news, claiming Russia hacked the U.S. electric grid last week. Complete nonsense, no evidence to back it up. They had to admit that wasn't true the very next day. Now we have these hearings. We have Senator Lindsey Graham saying that, you know, Trump should throw rocks at Vladimir Putin, openly hyping, escalating this military conflict, this aggression against Russia. But the polls show that the American people just don't believe it, Alex. I think the last poll was 58% said they didn't even believe that Russia had a hand in intervening in the election. On the flip side, though, 50% of Hillary Clinton supporters, when polled, thought that Russia had directly hacked voting machines. So again, some people are wise to this. Some people are completely misled. They continue with this hysterical Russian narrative, and it's a complete echo chamber, Alex. It's, oh, NBC has been leaked this report. The Washington Post reports on what NBC said based on shadowy, unnamed sources in the intelligence agency. Still, no actual proof whatsoever has been presented.
Well, that's right, Paul. And let's pull back from this and look at it. You have, as you just mentioned, the Washington Post, that is now the most deceptive mouthpiece for the globalists in this country, or even worse, the New York Times. The New York Times has so destroyed itself that it's starting to kind of back off a little bit, at least on the surface. The Washington Post says that the Russians hacked the Vermont power station, tried to shut down the East Coast. The whole thing was completely made up. 2 weeks they put out a list saying that InfoWars, Drudge, and others were Russian agents, basically, and that Russian bots were promoting us. Then a few days later, they had to retract it, saying, we don't know where we got the list. It's just made up. And so the good news is almost no one in the intelligence community is buying this. Nobody in the military is buying it. The American people in major polls aren't buying it, except for deranged, brain-dead Democrats who are really just pathetic people. They'll believe anything they're told. They're low information voters, and I'm quite frankly sad for them, how pathetic they are, but they're running around. You listen to NPR. I mean, it makes people that hated Russia for a reason, because it was run by communists back in the 60s, like Joseph McCarthy, sound like leftists compared to this. I mean, these people would call Joseph McCarthy a Russian agent. I don't say that in jest. That's how over the top their disinformation is. And the good news is, as you said, none of it's working. And then we've got Lindsey Graham, the guy that supports these, $1.5 billion airplanes that aren't even as good as a $2 million aircraft. I mean, that's admitted. An old used F-15 is better. You're running around saying, you'll do what I say, Trump. You'll come out and denounce Russia. If Trump came out and did this, they would have him. They could bully him forever. They could tell him to do whatever they wanted. The truth is, we want détente. We want a pivot. If Russia had 98% of rare earth minerals, the Panama Canal on both ends, had bought off much of Congress, had been involved in our election, was controlling Hollywood, buying up all 6 of the big production houses, and engaged in all this anti-American activity, threatening Japan, funding North Korea, building artificial islands, stealing our drone submarines, having mobile execution vans, having public executions of Buddhists and Christians, selling Christians organs, murdering Tibetans for no reason, dumping toxic waste into the atmosphere like nobody else's business. I mean, China is out of control. You've been there, you've seen it. And they're the ones in our business. So if Russia was doing 20% of what China was doing, I would be all up in their grill. Russia's not doing anything to the U.S. except, it's true, they're anti-leftist now. They are pushing pro-family values. In Russia, you would be arrested if you put on Fox TV there, the equivalent, a 6-year-old that is a tranny and who has sex with people and who wears a ball gag in his mouth and who likes blood splattered on his face. This is basically conditioning us for pedophilia. So in Russia, that's illegal. Here, it's not. It's force-fed. And the left is so pissed that after 75 years of having Russia under their control as a social experiment, taking a Christian nation and a totally conservative nation, probably the most conservative in history, and turning it into a leftist hellhole. I'm not defending Tsarist Russia the way it was. It was very, very old world, very, very feudal. But Europe had been feudal just 50 years before. Germany had been just as feudal as Russia 50 years before. So instead of Russia getting its reform, they got something 100 times worse. Absolute, total bedlam. So the Russian people, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, if you want the whole story, won his Nobel Prize for History and Literature. But then he came to the West and found out, oh my God, the Communist Revolution was funded out of New York City. He wrote best-selling books in Russia about it. They're bestsellers in Germany as well. The entire Russian intelligentsia now knows what really happened. That's why they arrested the oligarchs, the grandkids of the folks that took over Russia, kicked them out, and the same oligarchs are ruling us today. So we have solidarity with Russia, solidarity with Italy, solidarity with England, solidarity with Catalonia, with any group of people wanting self-destiny, wanting to be on their own, wanting to be their own country. And so if America ever becomes super evil or super destructive, I'm fine with Texas breaking off, or if part of northern Mexico and Texas decided to set up a free country and it was promoting more freedom, I'd say do that, if there's no other way to fix it. And clearly, with the euro, it was set up to be a tyranny. It was set up to be unelected. It was set up to consolidate power in their own admissions. It was set up to merge with the Middle East. So as an act of survival, Europe and Russia and the UK and Ireland and every other place has to stand up and say no. And look, we don't know what's happened in Florida yet. We don't know if there's multiple shooters. We don't know. They've got one guy in custody. You can put his name and photo up on screen. That's in the news now, up on Infowars.com. But what we do know is, as I've said, all hell is going to break loose during this election. I said it 2 years ago. I said it 6 months ago. I said it on election night. I said this isn't over. I said they're going to block the electors. They're going to have recounts. They're going to try to kill Trump. They're going to try to start a war in the Middle East and against Russia, because I know the enemy. And they operate targeting the lowest common denominator. They operate targeting low information voters, the type that'll tie up a black guy for no reason and torture him because you're a dumb white supremacist, or the same types that you're a bunch of black supremacists egged on by the media. You do the same thing. They target idiots. So we have to understand that we can see their propaganda, and instead of arguing with their BS most of the time, which I still do myself because it's fun to pick apart, we need to just overturn the entire paradigm and say these are known liars that have been caught running hoax after hoax after hoax after hoax after hoax after hoax. They are the fake news. So they're branding us as the fake news. And I think the most ominous thing so far here, Paul, that you've covered, I'd like you to take over now because you're more eloquent than I am. So I'm so honored to be able to take off a few days with the family, or at least partially take off. I'm still working probably 8 hours a day, just not 16 hours a day. To hear you and the rest of the crew working as a wonderful team, I'm very honored to be associated with you and with Nico and with all the rest of the wonderful crew. I'm very, very honored to be associated with these affiliates around the country and to be associated with the true return of Americana. We want Russia to be great. We want America to be great. We want Germany to be great. We want Mexico to be great. And it's multinational globalists that are nothing but the second wave of colonialism, that are anti-free market monopoly men, that are the people ruining Argentina and Venezuela and Mexico. I mean, Mexico was a paradise 60-something years ago. But even better than Mexico, Argentina was incredible. Venezuela was incredible. Argentina had more money than the average American and is way prettier. I'm sorry. I mean, I haven't been there. I've seen HD video, talked to folks that have been down there. It's like incredible. But they got monopoly men in that didn't want wealth anymore and cut the people off and made the population poor on purpose to control them. That's called feudalism. That's called serfdom. Globalism isn't reinventing austerity. Okay, they're just bringing it back with new names, but it's still the exact same thing. So we're seeing a tyranny. We're bringing back the latest, hottest thing to ever work. Free market capitalism, vote with your money, vote with your actions, vote with your reviews, vote with your feet, vote with your mouth, vote with who you marry, who you love. That's the true diversity. That's the true cultures coming together and building something better, not a top-down directed system. But Paul, you mentioned how I This is the algorithm they're putting in to have the leftists go around and tattle on everybody on YouTube and on Facebook with their special little licenses, their little thought brigades, and then challenge you and then not even let you, like Kafka-esque, know what you've supposedly done wrong to start the process of building a trail to claim that you've been banned for reason, so that when you get banned for no cause, you still subconsciously feel like you did because you were put through some type of kangaroo trial. So we should use Facebook and YouTube and Google as much as we can, but to direct everybody back to our platforms like Drudge has talked about, like Infowars.com/show. But we're under massive hack attack on a daily basis. Drudge is under massive hack attack. They're beta testing all this and getting ready with a major offensive globally, corporately, through media and more, to really try to sell us on accepting free speech being curtailed. The problem for them is all over the world, humanity is resisting this and rejecting it, and everything they're doing is falling on its face or is being deflated or shot down very quickly. So that's why everybody has got to re-intensify their actions with Infowars.com and our articles and our videos, or start your own blogs, your own websites, so that there's such a giant background noise of truth, they can't dampen it because we've got such a massive amplifier. But notice, they didn't start the censorship and trying to steal the election the day after. They waited a few weeks till they thought we went back to sleep. So now they're doing this during the new year. They're doing this when everybody's going back to school. They're doing this when everybody's busy trying to, pay the bills. They're now launching their control arms, their takeovers right now. So that's why it's essential to win this fight, is to buy into it, folks. Realize that history's happening. Realize that you can support liberty. Realize that we are having victories. And realize that if the enemy is able to win, if we give up control of our lives, if we submit to them, it is a horrible, horrible future. And all of our ancestors and what they went through to get us to this point have basically failed. So this is the struggle of the human species against the parasite predators in our own species. This is our big battle, folks. This is all of it on the table right now. But quite frankly, Paul, I think the big issues are we're seeing an attempted corporate global coup by rogue elements of the intelligence agencies here in America. They're the outsiders. They're the globalists, claiming that those of us trying to restore the republic are the enemy. But the other big story is, as you said, the massive censorship. And that's why, even though I know you're about to go on a well-deserved vacation, all of us have to remain vigilant, because we're some of the only leading lights that have analyzed the globalist attack plan and know how to defeat it. And our list.
We're reporting on the latest from the shooting at the airport in Fort Lauderdale. We had reports of a possible second incident earlier. That still remains unconfirmed. Some are saying that it's just being investigated. Some are saying that it happened and there are actual victims. WSVN is reporting another man being handcuffed in a possible second incident. Some witnesses reporting gunshots, but again, that's not clear yet. What is very strange about this is the initial reports were that the gunman, who apparently just surrendered when he ran out of bullets and has since been named as Esteban, let me get his name correct here, Esteban Santiago. He was named as the initial gunman. He was arrested, having put up no resistance, apparently, according to the reports. The eyewitnesses said that he said nothing during the rampage, but then there was a later report that he said, quote, "I'm not Jewish." Now, other people are saying that that could have been one of the frightened passengers thinking it was an Islamic terror attack, saying, "I'm not Jewish," in an attempt to avoid being shot. But again, one of the eyewitnesses said that that was what the gunman said. But again, as with all these situations, it's completely fluid and things change on a minute-by-minute basis. Broward sheriffs have tweeted that there is an active search, unconfirmed reports of additional shots fired on airport property. But again, it remains unconfirmed for the moment. Unfortunately, we do know that there are at least 5 dead. Initial reports said 14 injured, other reports said 8, but the death toll, unfortunately, is climbing. The TSA tweeted out an update that there was an active shooter to shelter in place. That seems like it was in reference to a second shooting, but again, remains unconfirmed. Did he make any kind of statement? Did he say, "I'm not Jewish," or was that one of the frightened victims? It remains to be seen. It remains to be seen who will exploit this for political grist. Again, you have a mainstream media after every Islamic terror attack that obsesses about saying not all Muslims are terrorists. Nobody's even denying that. You have a mainstream media that after every Black Lives Matter inspired attack says it has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. So we'll wait and see how it unfolds. Donald Trump has made a statement already on Twitter that he's monitoring the terrible situation in Florida. Just spoke to Governor Scott, thoughts, prayers for all stay safe. So Trump was quick to respond on Twitter. Also on a different subject, Trump has now had his intelligence briefing on Russia supposedly hacking the US presidential election, and he's issued a statement which says, quote, there was no tampering whatsoever with voting machines. There were attempts to hack the Republican National Committee, but the RNC had strong hacking defenses and the hackers were unsuccessful. He says at no point that he saw, according to this statement, any evidence that Russia hacked John Podesta's emails, the DNC emails, or anything. So that is a statement released after the conclusion of his meeting with intelligence community leaders, and it has not changed Donald Trump's mind. He goes on at the end of the statement to say, I will appoint a team to give me a plan within 90 days of taking office to aggressively combat and stop cyber attacks. And basically, Trump is not convinced by whatever he saw at this intelligence briefing. Breaking news on the Florida incident, and we will continue with this in the fourth hour. The Broward County Sheriff's Office just upgraded the incident to a terrorist attack, so it's confirmed that it is a terrorist attack. Reports of a second shooting remain fluid, but they're saying that this is obviously, doesn't really need to be said, does it? Terrorist attack. The culprit, at least one of them, has been named as Esteban Santiago. He had military ID. He shot people in the head. It was a terrorist attack. Unfortunately, the death toll is rising. We hope those reports of a second shooter are just panic, cars backfiring, etc. As Alex said, it could be anything. Fourth hour, we will continue to cover it on the Alex Jones Show Live. Stay tuned for continuing breaking news. Don't go away.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight. As you just heard from Paul Joseph Watson, they have now upgraded the shooting in Fort Lauderdale to a terrorist act. And, of course, it's 26-year-old Esteban Santiago. He is from New Jersey, born in the U.S. He was a military veteran. So far, 5 dead. Many have been wounded. So we're going to be bringing you updates as that happens. I want to talk today about, of course, this Russian issue and Donald Trump's response to this. He's asking why some in the press were given this information before he was by the U.S. intelligence agencies. That's a bit suspicious, don't you think? He's also asking for the House and Senate committees to investigate why this was done. Why were the press informed of this before he was informed of it? Perhaps it's because they're trying to create a narrative to get out ahead of him, to give their spin on it so that he can't reply to it for a day or so. And that's the first people that get out there, of course, as we've just seen with this phony fake news report from Washington Post this last weekend about Russia hacking the U.S. power supply grid. And, of course, that went out for several days before they printed any retractions. Every aspect of that story was false. First, we found out that it was just one small utility in Vermont. We found out it was a laptop that was not even attached to the power grid, that had a virus on it. And on the basis of that, they said that Russia had hacked the power grid. Then we found out that it wasn't even infected. So every aspect of this story was false. But I can guarantee you that most of the people in the United States believe that that has happened now, because they saw that story, headline news, for several days, and it was still out there in a lot of outlets, even after the Washington Post printed a retraction of that phony story. So this is what's happened now. This is Donald Trump criticizing leaks to several media outlets. The Washington Post reports that several media outlets were given priority over President-elect Trump in learning the details of the document. And, of course, this is because of people like Obama, James Clapper. Remember this guy? And I put this up on my Twitter account. I showed a little clip, 30-second clip, that exchange we had just prior to Ed Snowden releasing all that information. Remember, Clapper was asked in a committee hearing in the Senate. Senator Wyden asked him, are you spying on the American people? And he kind of puts his head down and rubs no, I'm not doing it. I couldn't even make eye contact with the guy. This is the guy, James Clapper, who is their lead witness in telling us what has happened with these. Why is this guy even in office? How does he have any credibility? He doesn't. And, of course, John Brennan involved in this as well. So Trump said, how did NBC get an exclusive look into the top secret report that Obama presented? Who gave them this report? Why? And then he answers, politics. That's why. He says, I'm asking the chairs of the House and Senate committees to investigate top secret intelligence that was shared with NBC prior to me seeing it. And, of course, they talk about the fact that what evidence do they have? Well, listen to the evidence that they have. Cited as evidence of Russian interference, intercepted communications between Russian officials who called Trump's victory a geopolitical success for Russia. So on the basis of that, on the basis that they're happy that the administration of Obama and Hillary Clinton, who was part of this resetting of the Cold War, the Russians celebrated. And I can tell you, they're very happy. The Russian people from the top to the bottom are very happy that there is not going, there they are celebrating. No, I don't think that's them celebrating, but that's somebody celebrating. They actually were going to rename a street in one of the small towns from Godless to Donald Trump Street because they were very happy about that. Listen, we were very happy when Nikita Khrushchev left. This guy who had gone to the United Nations, who had hammered his shoe on the podium and said, we will bury you, who had put missiles right at our border in Cuba, who had created the missile crisis. We're happy to see this guy go. And you know what? When you see somebody who is recklessly careless like that, who is creating conflict, as Obama did, Obama is their Nikita Khrushchev. That's the way they see it. Of course, they're happy to see him go. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show on this Friday, January 6, 2017. I'm David Knight, your host. I'll be joined at the bottom of the hour with Owen Schroyer. We're just talking about the tragedy in Fort Lauderdale, and that has now been upgraded by law enforcement there to a terrorist act. We've had 5 people so far have died. Others have been wounded. We don't know how serious their injuries are, so we'll be bringing you updates on that through the hour. But we were talking about this very interesting thing that is going on with the Red Scare being promulgated by the Democrats, this red herring, I think is the best way to call this. We ought to call it the red herring. You know, that's where you take a, that expression came from, where they would take a smelly fish. People who didn't like fox hunting in England, they would take a smelly fish, and as a fox went by, they would drag this smelly red herring over the trail so that the hounds would lose it and would not be able to follow the fox, and the fox would get away. Well, that's what the Obama administration and the Democrats are doing right now. They have got a smelly fish, which is nothing but a stinking lie, that they are dragging over this election so that you don't see what has really happened here. They don't want you to see some of the other things that have been resurfacing in the last few days, real intelligence issues, as we now see people going on the record and other information coming out verifying what we've been telling you for years, that John Kerry and others were admitting that the only thing they cared about in Syria was regime change. They were going to do whatever they needed to do. They were going to use terrorists as surrogates. They could care less about civilian casualties. They only wanted to empower ISIS if necessary. They didn't care if they made ISIS the biggest power in the area. So all those videos where you see ISIS cutting people's heads off, setting people on fire, drowning them in cages, that's the policy of Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and John Kerry. It was worth it for them for that to happen to the Syrian people so they could have a regime change there and set the area into chaos as they did in Libya. Still, no government existing in Libya. And we're going to talk at the bottom of the hour about Barack Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. We're going to talk about how he has left the Middle East in pieces. He's really more of an ignoble pieces prize that we're going to give him. And how many more wars he's had. He's been at war longer than any U.S. president in history. You kind of think of FDR as being the guy that was there, don't you? Well, you know, we had George W. Bush shatter that record. You know, think about that. World War II, it started in 1939. We didn't get into 1941. It ended in 1945. We were 4 years into that, but pretty much through most of George Bush's administration, we were at war. But throughout all of Barack Obama's administration, and he virtually doubled the number of countries that we went to war with. So he wasn't even trying to step it down. He broadened it out, and then he restarted a Cold War with Russia. So we were talking about this amazing red herring story that they have going, and the fact that they gave NBC and others the top secret report, they say, that Obama and Clapper and Brennan had put together. Donald Trump tweeted out, why did NBC get an exclusive look into the top secret report that Obama presented? Who gave them this report? Why did they do it? And then he answers it and says politics. And he said, I want the House and Senate committees to investigate this top secret intelligence shared with NBC prior to me seeing it. And of course, they say that this is proof, the fact that we have Russians celebrating that this warmonger like Obama, who started the Cold War, they're celebrating about the fact that this guy is going out of power. I want you to see this clip that we have, citing that as evidence that the Russians did it. You got the clip here?
Includes intelligence gathered after the election, bolstering the view Russia was behind the hacks and did so in part to help Donald Trump. Included in that new information were intercepted conversations of Russian officials expressing happiness at Trump's win. One official I spoke to described them as congratulatory conversations. This goes beyond the video that you may recall after the election where you saw government officials in Moscow toasting over champagne. These were actually intercepted conversations, Anderson, and this contributed to this assessment, but was just one of multiple indicators we're told to give officials the high confidence about both Russia's involvement and Russia's intention. And you heard today from DNI Chief James Clapper, who said multiple motivations will be included in the publicly released report on Monday, and also included in that report that was briefed to the president today, Anderson, the identifications of the go-betweens the Russians used to provide the stolen emails to WikiLeaks.
There you go. So that's their proof, the fact that you have Russians celebrating that the man and the woman who restarted the Cold War are not going to be in power, that there's been a change in power. And as I pointed out in the last segment, yeah, we celebrated when Nikita Khrushchev, this reckless individual, was no longer in power. Doesn't mean that we wanted to see Brezhnev in power, or that we put him there. But look at the example of this. They say they know that Russian officials made no secret of their preference for a Trump presidency after his surprise win in November. The Russian parliament even stood and applauded at the news. There you go. That's your evidence. Boy, I would tell you what, we have got people in the intelligence agency that are really sharp, don't we? They may not know how to protect their own secrets. They may not know how to keep Hillary Clinton from giving all of the top secret and above top secret intelligence that they have to everybody else. But boy, they can really discern who did this, can't they? Remember Guccifer? Remember the guy that was brought to the United States? We tried to get an interview with him. They wouldn't let us talk to him. They kept him under lock and key because they didn't want that coming out as they were pushing this narrative that only state intelligence could have gotten this information from the DNC. And yet, even here in this report, they say U.S. intelligence identified go-betweens who allegedly handed over stolen Democrat Party emails to WikiLeaks. Well, it's a public record. We've had both the current ambassador to the United States from Great Britain and a previous ambassador, to a British ambassador, not to this country, but to another country, saying that, firstly, British ambassador to the U.S. said, I had people meet with me at a party in Washington and said, I handed over that information. And he said they were Americans. And then we had a former British ambassador who works with WikiLeaks who said, I came to the United States and was handed the DNC information in a park by someone who was a whistleblower within the DNC, angry about the corruption in that organization as they moved against Bernie Sanders. And when you look at Guccifer, how did he get in and get the information that was George Bush's emails? He got Colin Powell's emails. He got Tony Blair's emails where they're talking back and forth about Bohemian Grove, things like that. Thoroughly embarrassed them. He got into all of their accounts by guessing their password. Guess what Podesta's password was? It's reported his password was password. You don't need Russian intelligence to get in there. You don't even need even human intelligence of more than a double-digit IQ to get in and get that email. Remember, Guccifer was not even a computer guy. He was just somebody who sat there and went to their account and put out there. Hillary Clinton's emails were on a website called ClintonEmails.com. So this idiot, she's not only a criminal, but she's an idiot. She puts all this stuff that's not protected all this classified information on a site that says ClintonEmails.com. It's like putting a big neon sign saying, come and get it. Everybody, friend, foe, anyone, China, Russia, anybody can get that stuff from Hillary Clinton. And yet they go through this whole thing saying it's a Russian hack, a Russian hack. Of course, all the intelligence agencies are hacking each other. They didn't need to do it for this. And as we've pointed out over and over again, nobody is saying that anyone got into their voting machines or electronic voting machines and flipped the stuff. That's not even what they're alleging. Now, I'm concerned about that. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened on either side. And we ought to take this opportunity to say we're going to make sure that our elections aren't hacked. We're going to get rid of electronic voting machines, and we're going to go back to paper ballots. But that's not even what this is about. Everybody realizes at this point, I think, that this is a red herring, but it is very interesting, I think, that that the CIA handed this stuff over to NBC and others, NBC, CNN, the Washington Post. Remember when we had Obamacare that was being sold to us? Remember how NBC broadcast for a week from the White House with Obama, where they were talking about the necessity for government-controlled health care? And do you remember how the Republicans said, well, we want to have some equal time to talk about our point of view, why we don't want to have Obamacare? Remember, NBC said, no, we're not going to give you equal time. And so then they came out and they said, well, all right, we'd like to buy some ads on the NBC Nightly News in the time slots where you're doing this dog and pony show with Obama. And they said, no, we're not going to sell you any ads. Remember that? See, that's your unbiased news media. They are putting this stuff out there. And anybody that questions the stories that come out of the official establishment media, anyone who questions the official story from the government is immediately dismissed as a conspiracy theorist. So you're not serious if you question the government narrative. And so what they're doing, and Donald Trump called them on it, they're creating and crafting a narrative, continuing down this absurd lane. And I can't understand what they think they're going to win with this. Of course, Obama, during his 8 years, has lost over 1,000 seats in state legislatures in terms of governorships and everything else, Congress, Senate. Over 1,000 seats have been lost by the Democrat Party. It's a record low in terms of the number of seats that have been held by the Democrat Party. That is the legacy of Obama's tactics in the Democrat Party. And yet they continue to double down. There's the article right there. Democrats lost over 1,000. I think the actual number is 1,030. And yet they continue to go down this failed tactic, this failed strategy. He's going to remain in Washington. That's why he's getting a house there, putting a wall around it. I mean, that's interesting. But he's the first president, says Woodrow Wilson, and I think the only president to remain in Washington after leaving the presidency. And he's going to stay in politics. He's going to use Eric Holder's already started in California to sue in court to try to overturn redistricting that was lost to Republicans. That's what they're going to do. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, your host. We're following this tragedy in Fort Lauderdale, the random shooting of a lot of people at the luggage collection area. 5 people at least are dead. We're waiting to get more information as it unfolds, but it has now been declared by local law enforcement as a terrorist act. And you know, as I look at that, I'm thinking about this new product that Alex introduced just last week, nanotechnology body armor. This is something, you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to see this coming. We now live, thanks to Obama, thanks to people like Angela Merkel and Hillary Clinton, we now live in a world of terrorism. These events are coming at an escalating frequency. You never know when you're going to have a situation where there's some idiot, some maniac pulls out a gun and starts shooting people. If you have something like this, I'm going to tell you, you can wear a vest, but also a very key thing they were talking about was putting this in a backpack. I mean, here these people are in the luggage area. If they had a backpack, carry-on luggage, they could at least have some kind of a shield that they and their children could hide behind. Your children, if you put this in their backpack, it's very lightweight. It's incredibly lightweight. This is a patented form of carbon nanotube technology. It's the lightest, strongest, most flexible body armor on the market. Even though it's only a 1/4 inch thick, the body armor is field tested and confirmed to stop one of the most powerful pistol rounds in production. They did this with the highest highest packing, the P++ armor as cartridges, as well as the calibers. It's waterproof. It's super lightweight. It's made in the USA. It comes with a 20-year warranty. Go to InfoWarsStore.com. Look at this exclusive line of tactical nanotechnology body armor that was previously only available to the U.S. military and law enforcement. You need to take a look at this, because in a situation like this at the airport where you're unarmed, but you do have luggage, this is something that you can use to protect yourselves. And the TSA, folks, is not going to protect you. All the security things that they do at the airport, as many people have talked about, it only bunching people up into lines at certain areas so they can go through and do their non-effective screening. And we know it's not effective because we have had reports where they intentionally send people through with weapons just to test the screeners to see if they're effective, and we know they're not, okay? And it's also an idiotic idea to bunch everybody up at the entrance to an airport. All it does is make you a vulnerable target. So do something to protect yourself, to protect your family, and that's a very easy thing to do. Get one of these things, put it in a backpack, use it as your carry-on luggage. You'll have a shield with you, even if you don't get a vest. But the vests are not heavy. They're not. We used to plug some vests that had heavy armor plates in them. This is not like that. This is incredibly lightweight nanotechnology. All right, I want to get back to the news here. There was an amazing, of course, there's a huge storm that is coming across the nation. And as this snowstorm approaches Washington, D.C., a place that I hate to, we used to live not that far from Washington, D.C., 3 or 4 hours away. And I remember going up there once to see the Holocaust Museum and just giving up in frustration because of the traffic, the parking situation. And it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. Every time we would go to Washington, D.C., it seemed like the traffic was worse and everything. Well, now they got a snowstorm coming, and they are charging people on these toll roads up to $30 an hour. Now, what they don't tell you in this story from Fox News in Washington, D.C., is that the company that's doing this, Transurban, is, guess what? They're from Australia. The only place in the United States where Transurban runs toll roads is right there in the Virginia area. All the rest of their stuff are toll roads in Australia. The toll roads here in Texas, the one that just went bankrupt, that's owned by a Spanish company. They're trying to put a toll road in North Carolina. Same way. North Carolina really hasn't had any toll roads, and neither has Texas until just a couple of years ago. Now they are multiplying. Why is that? Because these multinational corporations want to own our infrastructure. They want to turn you into renters, into serfs, into sharecroppers, where you don't own anything. You don't own your car. You're not going to own your home. You're going to rent everything from them, and they're going to raise the rate as they see fit. They're talking about this, and they came in their defense. Transurban said, well, these can vary quite a bit. They can go from 20 cents a mile to over $1 a mile as we see fit. We have an algorithm that changes this as it goes along. And they said a 36-minute trip would cost over $45. That's what they're saying in this report. How is that? How is that? Do you really want these people to have that kind of power, to do that kind of monopoly pricing? They say sensors along the road monitor traffic levels and speed. Toll prices adjust to maintain free-flowing conditions on the lanes to provide value to our customers. No, this is the same thing the International Monetary Fund did when they started loaning money to third world countries. And they were accused of rent-seeking. That's what they wanted. They want to take ownership away from you in every aspect of your life and then follow you and track you everywhere you go after they've taxed you. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Owen Schroyer.
These arrogant globalists thought they defeated humanity. But the truth is, whether it's Obama or George Soros, they're losers. Everything they had, everything they threw against us failed. Now, just because we defeated these tyrants for now doesn't mean we've won the war. The war is happening within our hearts, within our souls, within our minds. We have to be good. We have to be pure. We have to be strong. We have to build prosperity. And we have to bring everyone of every race, color, and creed together if we're going to truly defeat these tyrants who believed we were going to fail, who believed their divide and conquer would work. Yes, we've won the first phase, but the battle for the soul of humanity has just begun. But Obama and Hillary and Soros, You were losers from the day you were born. This is the heart of 1776. You're a white male!
It's also what happens when you listen to the radio host, Alex Jones.
Move, bitch! Get out the way!
We pledge allegiance to one flag, and that flag is the American flag.
InfoWars helped fuel the rumor that President Obama is an ISIS supporter.
It's been a cozy relationship from the beginning.
I will not let you down. You will be very, very impressed, I hope. And I think we'll be speaking a lot.
Donald Trump and Alex Jones.
This means that Donald Trump will be the 45th president of the United States.
Waging war on corruption. It's
Alex Jones.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight here with Owen Schroyer. And, of course, Owen, that was a great segment. If you were listening to that, if you haven't seen that, go to our YouTube channel and take a look at that Marvel opening. That was a masterpiece that our graphics guys, Darren McBreen and Walker did. That was really a great piece. Now, as we're talking about this hacking of the election, I think it's kind of interesting to look at the attitude of these people. You know, they don't want the vote that you put out there. They're trying to come out and offer any kind of a justification to shut this down. We've heard over and over again from people in the UK after the Brexit vote. I've heard people interviewed on the BBC saying, well, the idiots who voted for this just don't know what they're doing, and we need to find some way to shut this down. We need to find some kind of parliamentary procedure, some kind of a legal loophole to get us out of this or to have another vote so we can shut this down. But we can't let these people who don't know anything have this decision. And we've got people within the European Union saying that as well. A story on the New American. A EU boss said that citizens should not get to vote on important issues. On his way out of office, the rotating head of the European Union Council called on EU leaders to stop letting citizens vote on important issues. He cited recent anti-establishment votes in Britain and Italy. The EU Council boss blasted the quote-unquote adventures. The adventure. We got to stop this adventure of letting citizens decide the fate of their own nation in a referendum. He said, I'm asking EU leaders to stop with adventures like the British and Italian referendums on domestic issues. They pose a threat to the EU. So the EU must be preserved no matter what. And we don't want these stupid citizens having a say-so in their own destiny. This is the Slovak Prime Minister and EU Council boss, Robert Fico. He passed the reins of the EU to the next leader. This was back on January the 2nd. And you know, Owen, when they did this with Greece, they just took out the democratically elected prime minister, president there, I forget what their office was, removed him and put a Goldman Sachs banker in. And that was one of the times famously that we had Nigel Farage stand up and say, who are you? You know, you got the demeanor of a third-rank bank clerk, and you are in the seat of democracy. You're going to overrule the people and put in a banker and throw out the person who was elected. And now they're doubling down on it and say, we got to stop with this adventure of letting people actually have votes. And that's really what's going on here in America. They don't like the result of the election, and they're going to do whatever they can to try to stop this. It's absolutely amazing.
Well, I get the feeling that this EU leader would change his tone if the citizens agreed with him. What's going on is that the citizens no longer agree with their leaders because they're sick of leaders lying to them with agendas that aren't to their best interest. So if the citizens that he's constituents of would have gone along with his policies, gone along with his agenda, he wouldn't be coming out saying citizens should not vote on important issues. He'd be saying, oh, the citizens get the issues right. But because the citizens are going against him, well, now the citizens can't have a vote. See,
the policies of globalism that they're reacting to, they're not about to change those policies.
Exactly.
No, we're going to go ahead with globalism. What we got to do is we got to roll back democracy. We got to roll back republics. We got to roll back sovereign nations. We got to roll back any say-so in these people. When they know that they're getting screwed by these policies, we're not going to let them do anything about it.
But you talk about what's happening in America, that same dynamic is happening, except it's happening with the president of the United States. They don't want him to vote. They don't want him to have an opinion. They're trying to completely delegitimize Donald Trump's would-be platform as the president of the United States before he even gets into office, for the exact same reason that this EU boss says that citizens can't vote, because we don't want to go along with their agenda. That is point blank why the EU boss doesn't want citizens to vote. That is why they're trying to delegitimize Donald Trump before he becomes president.
They want to shut him down, and it's absolutely amazing. He was angry about it. The fact that you would have this ridiculous dog and pony show trying to sell this patently false narrative that somehow the Russians hacked our election by telling us the truth about Hillary Clinton. Whoever put that information out there, if it was the Russians, I stand up and applaud you, just like you stood up and applauded when we said we don't want somebody that's going to bring us into a new Cold War with you. Let's talk about our Peace Prize president as he's about to go out. You know, one of the first things that happened with Barack Obama, people, look at the difference 8 years ago. They were so excited about Barack Obama coming in that they gave him a Nobel Peace Prize before he had done anything. And now, before Donald Trump has done anything, they've declared him to be Adolf Hitler. And they have come out in every way possible against Donald Trump. But let's take a look at, for example, foreign wars. Okay, we've had twice the number of wars nearly. We've had 4 wars. We were at war with 4 different groups of people, bombing them during the Bush administration. He not only continued in those 4 countries, but he upped it to another 3 countries, had 7 during Barack Obama's regime. He was at war the entire time of his presidency. No other president has ever done that. So we have perpetual war. He added drone assassination. We saw the CIA used to be ashamed of doing assassinations, so they used to deny it. Now they brag about it. He bragged about how good he was at killing it. He's assassinated Americans abroad without trial. And, of course, this is all accelerated in the last year.
Well, and they just showed the graphic there for the viewers at Infowars.com/show, but for the radio audience, U.S. drops more bombs in Obama's final year of office than in 2015. The U.S. dropped over 26,000 bombs in 2016. That's over 3,000 more than 2015. And the key stat here for me, as they're flashing the graphic right now on the screen, they dropped 12,095 bombs in Iraq, 12,192 bombs in Syria. Now, Syria and the civil war that's going on there has obviously been a big story. The recapturing of Aleppo for Assad, the demonization of Assad from John Kerry and Barack Obama and the establishment. But what's amazing is the truth has come out. We know what Barack Obama did in Syria, David, and what did he do? He armed ISIS terrorists, but called them moderate rebels. We caught them red-handed. This is an undeniable fact. So my question is, the 12,000 bombs that the United States dropped in Syria, whose name were those bombs dropped in? Were they dropped in the name of ISIS or moderate rebels? Were they dropped in the name of Syria, or were they dropped in the name of the United States, Barack Obama? My guess, based on the evidence that we have right now, the evidence left behind by the moderate rebels that got kicked out of the region, I would say that you could make the point that Barack Obama has been dropping bombs in the name of ISIS or quote-unquote moderate rebels over 12,000 times in Syria this last year.
Oh, we've been al-Qaeda's Air Force. There's absolutely no question about it. And this was something, if you go back, one of the things in this article from McClatchy, and of course they're an establishment, part of the establishment media, they say that Obama was widely criticized for failing to follow through on the red line that he set up in Syria. Remember that? He said, we're going to set up a red line here. They said Assad used chemical weapons against his own people. No, actually, we pushed back against it. And InfoWars was the tip of the spear on pushing back against that. Remember, we said you can't say, just as you can't say that Russia are the ones who turned over this information. We've had a lot of evidence that it wasn't Russia, that it was other people. But at the time, they were saying, and they were trying to get us involved in this war, they said only the Syrian government could have used that sarin gas there. And so we need to go in because now it's reached the level of a massive terrorist event. We need to get directly involved. We pointed out that that wasn't true, that it had been used before. We also had Russian intelligence then first came out and made that case. The United Nations came out and made that case. And eventually, U.S. military came out and made the case as well. And before that happened, remember, we had people holding up signs on social media saying, I'm not going to go be al-Qaeda's Air Force. We had Rand Paul saying we're going to be acting as al-Qaeda's Air Force. That's what he's been doing. That's what they've done throughout the region. All this war that they started in Libya was to essentially create unrest that still is unrest. And they created an arms bazaar in Libya that has now spread out through the entire area, set the Middle East on fire. They've deliberately used ISIS, which is nothing but a rebranding of al-Qaeda, and we all know that, all these people who said, oh, we're moderate rebels, now they've come out and said, no, we're Al-Qaeda or we're ISIS. We know that's nothing but a beard, just a rebranding. They've used them as surrogates all the way back to the Afghanistan war against the Russians. And they continue to escalate them. They wanted regime change, and they didn't care if ISIS was put in charge of Syria and Iran. They wanted regime change. They didn't care how many Aleppo boys suffered from all of this either.
Oh, and that foreign meddling that cost people's lives, the liberals don't seem to mind, but the alleged Russia meddling in our election that didn't cost anyone a life is apparently some big deal. But here's the thing to me. Okay, so here's what we know. Barack Obama sent funding and weapons to moderate rebels to fight Assad in Syria. Of course, we know this is ISIS. We also know that Barack Obama's administration dropped over 12,000 bombs in Syria. But hold on. For the last couple of years, for years now, John Kerry and Barack Obama have both said that there is no successful military option in Syria. It simply doesn't exist. We're not going to do it. There is no successful military option, so we're not going to do it. But then hold on. Why did you drop 12,000 bombs? Why are John Kerry and Barack Obama telling us that there is no successful military plan in Syria, but dropping bombs 12,000 times? These guys are completely, I mean, I don't know, lying isn't even the correct nomenclature for these people anymore, David. I mean,
well, let's understand that it's like 12,000 in Syria, then it's another 12,000 in Iraq. These are ISIS-controlled areas, but we just had Russia comment earlier this week saying, isn't it miraculous that the U.S. didn't bomb any ISIS-controlled oil fields? So they dropped 25,000 bombs in areas where ISIS is, okay, saying that they're fighting ISIS, but they don't drop a single bomb on any of their oil fields. That tells you something right there. And, of course, we've also had people like a Chechen military commander, an ISIS commander, say, yeah, I was brought here from Chechnya by the CIA. They said, yeah, stop fighting the Russians and come over here. The Russians understand. The Russians are involved in this because 18% of Russia's population is Muslim. They've been dealing with this for a very long time. They take this very seriously. I think Donald Trump takes this very seriously. And we understand that Obama also takes it seriously. He's not incompetent. He knows precisely what he's doing. We've had WikiLeaks exposing John Kerry saying, right there, you see that, John Kerry talking about how they were going to do this regardless of the consequences. They wanted this regime change. So this is what we've seen in foreign war, Owen. But let's take a look at other aspects of war. Let's think about the fact that, of course, it's the same Barack Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who restarted the Cold War with Russia. That's one of the reasons that they're celebrating. And then we see the news media talking about how the Russians are evil because they annexed Crimea. No, Crimea has been part of Russia since before the United States was the United States.
And how about we just let, Ukraine and the people in that region decide for themselves? But again, the U.S. has to get involved meddling in foreign affairs, but then bitch and moan about it when people try to do it with us. But, this is not a new narrative. This is incredible to me. This is actually a story out of CNN from September in 2014. Countries bombed by the United States under the Obama administration. Even CNN is admitting this. President Barack Obama has always acknowledged that there are times when military force is necessary, except in Syria, even though he bombs them 12,000 times. Even when he accepted his Nobel Peace Prize in 2009, he said that there were instances when war was morally justified. How about this story? This is out of the Daily Caller from May of last year. Nobel Peace Prize winning president has been at war longer than any other American president. New York Times. For Obama, an unexpected legacy of 2 full terms at war. Again, where are all the liberal crybabies? Barack Obama turned out to be a wartime president. Barack Obama turned out to be a warmonger. Barack Obama brought in the drone agency into full effect. Why aren't you complaining? Why aren't you moaning? You cried and complained at the false narrative when James Clapper sent us to war over weapons of mass destruction that they never proved exist. So why aren't you upset over Obama and James Clapper doing the same thing here at the beginning of 2017, trying to muck up the works before Donald Trump gets into office?
Yeah, let's also understand that it's not just the foreign wars that we see. We've also had the situation of martial law being brought to us at home. Remember that it was under Barack Obama that we had the NDAA first used in an underhanded way to create indefinite detention, to allow them to render people that they have arrested without trial to a foreign country where they could be tortured. We had the militarization of the police using MRAPs. And then they tried to promote the centralized control of the police by creating a war between blacks and the police, by creating a war between white people and black people with Black Lives Matter. And we just saw a lot of evidence of that this last week with this most recent attack. So he not only created martial law at home, tried to do everything he could with that, indefinite detention without trial, and creating militarization, centralization of the police, but then he also tries to create, and pretty successfully does so, a beginning of a race war here at home. And then he has his war against journalists and whistleblowers. We've had Barack Obama in the 100 years since the Espionage Act of 1917 was created. Barack Obama has used that against journalists and whistleblowers more than every other president combined over the last 100 years. And now they're finishing up again with the NDAA, putting in a Ministry of Truth, empowering the State Department, where Hillary Clinton and John Kerry did all their Machiavellian setting on fire of the Middle East. They are giving the power to that organization to act as a Ministry of Truth, $180 million. And, of course, it's not just Obama. I wish it was Obama only. But, of course, it's also Republicans who are supporting this. Now they're putting in that very organization a kind of Ministry of Truth to step up the war against the free press. Not just persecuting individual journalists or whistleblowers, but now setting that up to really start an information war.
Well, if you haven't seen enough 1984 Orwellian in the flesh here over the course of the last 6 months, I don't know how Obama, a Nobel Peace Prize winning president, being at war longer than any other president, isn't the most. I mean, what is it? War is peace. I mean, isn't that directly from 1984? War is peace. Here you go. Nobel Peace Prize winning Obama has been at war longer than any other American president.
It is a tool of control, and that's what we learned from 1984, and that's what he learned. Not only is it the length of time that he's been involved, not only is it going from bombing 4 countries to 7 countries at a time, but it is also the scope and scale of it, and it's bringing war here at home. Stay with us. We're going to be right back. David Knight with Owen Schroyer. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight here with Owen Schroyer. We just learned that the shooting in Fort Lauderdale, the individual involved flew in from Canada. He had checked his pistol into his luggage. He pulled it out there in the luggage claim area and began shooting people. 13 people were shot. 5 of them subsequently died. They're still trying to figure out what the guy's motive was. But again, it underscores what we were saying before. You have to make sure that you do everything that you can to protect yourself, to protect your family. It is not over the top anymore in the world that Barack Obama has left us, that you need to have some kind of armor, some kind of body armor. We just had another article talking about the war legacy of our Nobel Peace Prize president. Over Obama's reign, from 2009 to 2016, Breitbart went through and did the numbers. They said that there were 4,230 people killed in Iraq, and in Chicago alone, 3,903. Gun control, Chicago. Gun-controlled airports. This is where this shooting took place, because gun control areas are killing zones. You need to make sure, if they're going to take your gun away, if they're going to keep you defenseless, you need to make sure that you can at least shield yourself. That's why we're selling tactical nanotechnology body armor that was previously available only to the military, only to law enforcement, is now available exclusively at InfoWarsStore.com. This is a patented form of carbon nanotube technology. It is the lightest, strongest, most flexible body armor you will find on the market. It's only a 1/4 inch thick. It is field tested, confirmed to stop the most powerful pistol rounds in production. It is waterproof, super lightweight, made in the U.S., 20-year warranty. You can find it at InfoWarsStore.com. And as we pointed out, you can get it in a vest form, or you can buy something that you can stick into your backpack and turn your backpack into a shield for you, for your children. So that when you're in an airport where you're not allowed to carry a gun, or you're picking up your bags and you've got some idiot who decides he's going to do this, or you're bunched up at the going through the TSA lines as they make you into a vulnerable target doing their screening, you have something at least that will stop a bullet. So that's the insert that you can see right there on the screen. So take a look at that. This is the world we live in, folks. You have a responsibility to protect yourself. You have a responsibility to protect your health as well. That's why we have put on special a good number of products that we have at InfoWarsLife.com as part of the Make Our Bodies Great Again initiative. We have Brain Force, 30% off. Super Male Vitality, 30% as well off. We have Liver Shield and Secret 12, both 20% off. And we have Prostagard Knockout, 20% off. Many other things are available at InfoWarsLife.com. And also this year, as you're taking care of your health, think about auto ship. This is the way you make sure that the things that you use on a regular basis are not going to be out of stock. You also get an additional 10% off. And this is something that I've not seen before. I think it is new. If your auto ship orders are $50 or more, you get free shipping. So that's very important. Take a look at the auto ship option, but take a look at the sales that we have going right now at InfoWarsLife.com. And please take a look at something you can do to protect yourself, because the government is making you a target. Let's go back to what we were talking about, Owen, as the Nobel Peace Prize president is starting on his way out.
Well, actually, David, I wanted to thank you for saying something that you just said. Gun-free zones are killing zones.
Yeah.
I've been saying this for a while. How many people have to become martyrs in the name of liberal agendas? Gun control is one of them. As you can see, you cannot control guns. You cannot control people. The 5 people that died at the airport today are now martyrs in the name of gun control. Now, they didn't have the option, but they could have had a gun on them in a Constitution zone, and they could have defended themselves. They didn't have that option, so there's more martyrs for liberal gun control.
That's right. And at least they could have had, and this is something now that you have, is the ability to protect yourself with something that's lightweight. I think that's a great product. In the past, these things have been heavy, very, very heavy, very, very bulky if they're going to stop anything. That has changed now with the nanotube technology. That's it for today's show. Join us tonight for the InfoWars Nightly News, 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.